3 hours of gameplay builds, prototypes, and footage that regular players weren't ever supposed to get access to or get to ever see. Now there's a lot of games we end up covering here. Like, look at some of these names that you see on the screen. But here's the interesting thing. This video in a way is a follow-up to another video we did where we spent 3 hours looking at games we were never supposed to play. We are avoiding double dipping and covering games that were covered in that video, but look, there's still 3 hours of content here. So if you haven't seen that video, when you're done with this one, it'll be recommended at the end, and you can just continue your watch session and have a great old time. That being said, if there's a game that you're wondering why it's not in this video, it might have been in the other video. Cyberpunk 2077 is a really interesting game to me, especially if you look at the development here, because all the way back in 2013, a teaser for the game was revealed, which means that the game had 8 years of development, and then when it launched, it was kind of unpolished, even with 8 years of development. So like, what did the game look like before its actual launch with the state that it was in at launch? I mean, by the way, it's a good game now if you haven't gone around to playing it yet, so maybe check it out. Well, here's the deal. While I stand on the camp that Cyberpunk 2077 entered development 8 years before its launch, there's actually a lot of people online who would make the argument that Cyberpunk 2077 only started development after The Witcher 3 released in 2015, which would then mean that Cyberpunk 2077 only had 5 years of active development. And while I believe that development definitely ramped up after The Witcher 3 launched, I think the game was definitely in development beyond just the maybe earliest pre-production stages of the game. More on that in a second, but just overall, Cyberpunk 2077's development is very interesting. Like, I find the build of Cyberpunk 2077 that was kind of accidentally released before Cyberpunk 2077 came out to be interesting in itself. You see, Cyberpunk 2077 did get a delay kind of at the last minute in 2020. Originally, it was set to release, I think, in September, then it was delayed to November, and then finally December. However, with the game getting a physical launch, production of a game like this has to have a build of the game ready to go before launch. And with the final delay being pretty sudden, the game was already gold in some regions, even if it hadn't reached retail yet. So those discs would eventually make their way out there, and people were able to eventually, after the game's full release, realize that they had an older disc. At least this is how I understand it to have happened, which in turn meant that if you put the game in your Xbox or PlayStation and you did not update to like whatever title update was available and you played the disc version of the game, you essentially had access to an older build, what was almost the retail build of the game. And it is dramatically different than what we got in December. I think this build, people speculate, is like from August or September, early September maybe. The fact that this exists is interesting in itself, but what we now have that just recently was uncovered is something that shows Cyberpunk 2077 was having some sort of development on it all the way back to 2011 or 2012 when they had officially greenlit the game. This little bit of footage is a prototype proof of concept build of Cyberpunk 2077 dating all the way back to 2013. And this is so fascinating to me because this is very clearly a completely different game. And while I guess this technically falls under like a pre-alpha build of Cyberpunk 2077, this is essentially just a completely different game. It has much more of an emphasis on third person. Everything is like very condensed. We don't get to see Night City or anything like that, but we get to see an apartment, and we get to see like the character V, who seemed to be more of like a baseline protagonist than kind of the more static character that we get to enter in as the player. But this build of the game only opens up so many more questions because there's obviously a lot of little dialogue, a little bit of these like characters that V is talking to, and also, I don't know, when I'm watching this footage back, it sounds like someone's aggressively brushing their teeth in the background or something. I have no idea what that sound is. I thought maybe someone was brushing their teeth in the game. But nonetheless, I really hope more of this build ends up releasing. I'd love to see more alpha footage, or what if there's a playable build out there where you can, I don't know, walk around the apartments even more. It looks like Night City in the background is being developed out more, but some of the buildings aren't even rendered in right, so it could just be like more of a static set piece to show the vibe here. And obviously the voice acting was not going to be final. That was just placeholder voice acting, but still, this is so cool. I'm so glad we at least get to see an early build of the game and what it kind of looked like early on. It kind of looks like a Saints Row spinoff more than what Cyberpunk 2077 was, with the whole whole emphasis on first person. Now, Halo, of course, has a huge list of prototypes. So before we talk about the other stuff, I'm inserting myself in now from the future, probably the day before this video goes out, because there's new Halo prototype news that just dropped at the time of me recording this. But all the way back in the day when the Master Chief Collection released on the Xbox One, it included Halo 2 Anniversary Multiplayer, which was the new multiplayer experience that just took maps from Halo 2 and they were like modernized at the time. They essentially had a brand new multiplayer that was built off of Halo 4's multiplayer that played like Halo 2, but it definitely wasn't like the Halo 2 engine or anything like that. Nonetheless, there is now a build of Halo 2 Anniversary Multiplayer that leaked on the Xbox 360, because development apparently started on the 360, which I guess in turn makes sense because this was 2014 when MCC came out. They built off of the Halo 4 engine, which was an Xbox 360 game, so it's no real surprise that Halo 2 Anniversary Multiplayer's development started on the 360. I just didn't think that there was an actual build that would ever leak from that version of the game. There's not a lot of info out there on it yet, and I haven't looking into the build myself, but I fully expect Vengeful Vadim to eventually do a video as he's covered a ton of prototype stuff, and we should get a closer look at that. So that's just like exciting news. But let's talk about the rest of Halo, and you know, the part that I had already recorded for this video before this new news. Now, over the years, we used to cover a ton of Halo stuff, especially prototype versions of Halo that would be leaked over the years, and it can be really interesting from a video game fan perspective to see what some really popular games like Halo looked like in the early stages. But Halo has had some really big breakthroughs recently that we've never gotten an opportunity to talk about. And by recent, I mean like 1 month ago at the time of this video being posted. Recent. Now, some people who know Halo would know that there is the infamous Halo 2 E3 demo, which is like a legend practically, but essentially at E3 2003, Bungie did a presentation where they showed off Halo 2 gameplay in the flesh, and then when the game came out, this level was nowhere to be found. And apparently there was like a bunch of development issues with Halo 2 we've talked about before. It was a wild development, and a lot of stuff got cut because it just didn't work like stably with the engine. There's been efforts by Microsoft and 343 and whatever they're called now, Halo Studios, to get like fans to do the work at restoring it for an MCC mod, and that's kind of cool. You can kind of get a vibe for what it's like, but the actual build ended up getting leaked. I'm not sure what the logistics are you have to jump through to actually play it, whether or not Xbox emulation will let you play it or an upgraded Xbox original with like the RAM upgrade you can play it on. Maybe you need a developer kit. I don't know. Nonetheless, the fact that this is now public and people can explore it is really cool. But this demo isn't the only thing that ended up getting leaked. There was a development build of the game, which is way bigger and way cooler than this demo getting leaked, I think, because this really lets us dig into a lot of different things that Halo 2 had more than a year before its release. And there's a lot of like footage of people exploring this. Unseen Halo has a great video going in depth as to all the content that is available in this build that obviously was very early on. I mean, look at all the DaVinci textures all over the place here. It really does look more like a Halo 1 type game before everything was refined to be more like Halo 2. And as many of us know, there were a ton of Halo 2 levels that were scrapped, and this build has a lot of encounters that never made it into the final build. A lot of things that were just used for testing. And I don't know, I find this so fascinating. I don't know why Halo 2 has so much stuff just kind of coming out all of a sudden, but hey, I'm all for it. And this build has a lot of other things that are really interesting, like Master Chief's Combat Evolved helmet found in the files as showcased here by Cashiera. There was a whole multiplayer test available and people got that running online. Okay, why not? Some people can run it on emulation, so that's cool, or some people actually could run it, I think, on actual hardware. This one might run better on real hardware, I don't know. But I can guarantee you, Microsoft probably never wanted anyone playing the 2003 version of Halo 2's multiplayer like this, but hey, that's awesome. Halo, of course, has had a lot of leaks in recent years. Back in 2024, for example, the Dig Site team, that team that 343 had brought on to restore content for MCC, when Dig Site collapsed, a lot of leaks came out from the Dig Site team. I mean, there's a build of Halo from all the way back in 1999, which was a few months after the initial reveal for the game, back when it was like a Mac exclusive. Just because we're following this trend going back in time for Halo, back in 2022, the infamous Pimps at Sea build of Halo 3 was leaked. It was just a multiplayer alpha of Halo 3. It's famous because back in the day, some Bungie employees were playing it on Xbox's like closed private thing, and it listed as Pimps at Sea, but it's just Halo 3, obviously. It was clearly for Microsoft employees only, but it's cool to look at, and there are some notable differences that you can see in this. And all this Halo stuff is just really interesting, and it can be added to the long list of prototype builds from Halo that have just slowly been revealed over the years. Like, I don't know, interesting notable ones that I can remember is that first level of Halo 4, which was quite different depending on how old of a build you're playing. There was also that Halo Mega Bloks build of a canceled Halo game. It was a prototype game, it wasn't really a full-fledged game, but that one's pretty interesting that got leaked a while back. So yeah, if you're really into Halo, check out some of our other videos on, like, I don't know, cut Halo content. I feel like we have a long video where we just talked about that. It's definitely worth a watch. Now, obviously, we're not going to talk about every single Halo prototype that has leaked over the years because there's been so many of them and we have a whole dedicated video to that. But when it comes to Halo prototypes, I think it's really interesting when Halo gets used as a prototype or a completely different game, which is exactly what happened in the Shadowrun reboot. Shadowrun was a really interesting game. This originally released in 2007, but it's a part of a bigger franchise. Shadowrun actually got its starts all the way back in 1993 and had a short run in the 90s before finally coming back as a multiplayer, first-person, sometimes third-person deathmatch type game that was on games for Windows and Xbox 360. There was a bunch of issues with the game. It's like a wild ride. You remember this game, right? We've talked about it on this channel before.
I think there was something where they really hyped, oh, this was a crossplay game. Yeah, that's what it was.
It was like one of the first crossplay games between console and PC. Now, obviously, the game had this whole like buying system that was inspired by other games like Counter-Strike. But in the earliest of days, when the company FASA Studios was still making the engine that would run the Shadowrun reboot, they used this game as the basis for prototyping different ideas. And over the years, 2 different builds of Shadowrun's Halo prototype have leaked, and they're both quite different, but I just think that is really fascinating to look at. Now, the older one is a 2004 prototype. There's not a whole lot of info out there, but you can download it and play it. And I did find a video by a user named Punny88, and he's just like playing multiplayer on this version using X-Link Kai to like kind of fake networking, and it's straight up Halo. This is from 2004, and they're like doing the earliest prototyping, and honestly, this is way more Halo than it's not Halo. But there's some interesting things even in this mode. There's like this wall running mode, and then there's like a glider that have movements, and you can see that they're already starting to implement a buying system or some sort of like toggle for getting new things acquired. And there's other weapons though that aren't in Halo. This does make sense for 2004. It does seem really weird because Halo notoriously used the Blam engine, which was known to be a really confusing engine for outsiders that weren't a part of Bungie for developing games. However, Halo in 2003 was a pretty new game on the PC, and the modding community on the PC version of Halo was really active, and it was really easy to like build maps and stuff like that. So I don't think it's crazy that they chose to use Halo as a basis for testing out different ideas, because if this is 2004, they're using a game that's probably just a couple of months old at that point, and it actually makes more sense than it just like randomly being used here. Now, there was another build of the game that came from a year after this build that did end up leaking as well, and this time around the prototyping phase is much further along and there's a lot more you can look at. And honestly, this gameplay footage is really impressive to look at. It feels in a weird way like the Halo Combat Evolved sequel spin-off game or something that we never got, because so much of this is still at its core Halo. They had more time to work with different ideas and just build things out that weren't necessarily Halo related. And you can see the switch between first person and third person. We see a couple of different gun designs, even though sounds are reused from Halo. What's also interesting is that there was plans to have a single player mode at some point with this game, so they were messing around with that aspect of the game as well. Vengeful Vadim did a really good breakdown a couple of years ago on this version of the game as well, and there's some interesting things that they also used as like testing things, like even the flood from Halo was used for some tests. And I don't know, I think that that's kind of funny. I don't know, we don't see too much in the lineage of Halo being used for different games. There's a couple of games that we will talk about in this video, but there's not a whole lot. Which brings me to my next topic point, another game that we've talked about multiple times on this channel, so we won't spend too much time on. Destiny 1. Technically, its engine is like the long lost child of Halo's engine. After Halo 3, Bungie split their team up into like 3 different teams to work on 3 different engines. One that would be used for ODST, one that would have a little more time to cook, that would then be ready for Reach, and then one that would be forked from Halo 3 that would eventually be used for Destiny. But while that engine was still being worked on, they used Halo Reach's engine after Reach's release to do a lot of prototype testing. So Halo Reach essentially, eventually, was used to plan this, but the 2 engines are different. But there's a Halo Reach Destiny engine floating out there on one of Bungie's computers somewhere that has this weird Halo Reach build with a ton of Destiny assets in it. And I think that that's really interesting. Years ago, a little bit of early prototype footage from Destiny was revealed, and you can see some similarities. Like, I think some animations of like things like armor lock were being used already at this point. And there are some similarities to Halo, but it mostly looked pretty different. We did, back in the day when we did a deep dive on this, talk to Dan Miller on Twitter, one of the developers at Bungie at the time of them working on these prototype things. And he even mentioned that like they were testing out a ton of ideas, like driving warthogs and stuff in case they wanted to do some sort of vehicle focus for Destiny. So definitely this Halo Reach build for Destiny was a pretty heavy piece for at least a long-ish amount of prototyping time before they started fully building things out over for Destiny on the Tiger engine, which was like the sequel to the Blam engine. I don't know. I think that's really cool. And it's just cool to see that while the Blam engine didn't have a ton of branches, a few of them are still being used to this day. Especially if Halo's going to no longer use it after Halo Infinite, because that whole debacle with 343 lying to everyone saying they're making a new engine. And it's just really another evolution to the Blam engine. A lot of the stuff they said was fake. Anyways, that's it.
Are you implying 343 would lie to us?
I would never. They're the best studio.
I don't think we can, I just don't want to go there, Okay, I asked you this a couple days ago already, but do you remember the Xbox 360 game Hail to the Chimp?
I had heard of the game before. I've definitely heard of it. I don't remember anything about it whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't think it was a very, revolutionary game. It was just like a party game. Play against 3 other players. You run around, you beat each other up, you collect votes and deposit them, and, there's just different mini games. And it released in 2008 for Xbox 360 and PS3. And the whole setting is a parody of the election cycle and the news cycle behind it, but instead of becoming the president of the United States, it's for you becoming the president of the animal kingdom, I guess. I'm not sure how many people actually remember it at all, but I mean, here's the cover, so maybe you've seen this.
Was there any connection with this game in Halo?
Well, that's what I'm actually gonna get into.
Oh, okay, that's what I think. I just remember hearing this, something Halo related from way back in the day.
Oh, okay, but before we can get to the Halo part, we gotta go a little bit back. So originally, this was actually in development and planned to be released on the original Xbox, but then the Xbox 360 came out and the original Xbox version was cancelled, and they ported over some of the work to a different engine and then started development for a 360 and PS3 version sometime around 2006. Now, this is where the Halo part comes in. This OG Xbox version was prototyped on a fork of the Halo engine, and that was the one that was used for Stubbs the Zombie.
So they used the Blam engine then?
Yeah, they used the Blam engine, or whatever, the Blam engine version of Stubbs the Zombie.
Right, the fork of the fork.
So here's the graph. Look at this.
Yeah, this chart, I love this chart. I love referencing this chart. Look at where we started with Halo Combat Evolved all the way up here, and now look at us.
How far we've fallen. How about the chart is just games?
Yeah.
Sorry.
But you know what's interesting, just since we're on the topic here? I think that this is really interesting, and when we've just covered Halo content before, I was like, guys, nobody realizes Destiny is still built off the blueprint of Halo. I was just trying to explain that. But if you really want to look at some of the other popular engines that are out there, like ID Tech Engine or something like that, that engine started a ton of things. That's way more impressive than Halo's. I didn't realize that Call of Duty was built off of that originally. I mean, I think it's its own engine now, but I think it essentially started as there was assets built for that engine. And then when they grew out of that and had a specific Call of Duty engine, those assets would move over. But I think somewhere in there's some lineage connected to it still.
Okay. Going back to Hail to the Chimp. This actually wasn't known for the longest time until in 2021 a prototype was leaked to Hidden Place. They posted a long list of OG Xbox prototypes in 2021, and Hail to the Chimp was one of them. And it actually came from a disc dated November 15th, 2006. That was a year after the 360 came out. So they must have still been developing Hail to the Chimp for the original Xbox up until November 2006, which is kind of weird. Why were they doing that? But I guess sometime after that they decided to switch over, and obviously the game looks different now. Different engine, obviously better graphics and stuff like that. But I kind of like the original better. It looks more fun. I don't know.
Okay, before we get to the next game, we actually have a new long-term partner we're really excited about, and it's Cheeky. Cheeky's a premium soap brand that makes cold processed bars with rich lather, bold scents, and high-quality ingredients designed to leave your skin feeling clean and moisturized. This is hands down our favorite way to shower right now. If you're not sure which scent to a try, we definitely recommend you check out the starter bundle because that's what we used. It comes with 6 different scents, plus a soap tray and soap bag, so you can just figure out what your favorites are right out of the get-go. My favorite is Pulp Francis, but Luke really likes Touch Grass, so I mean that's fitting, right? So you can try out Cheeky totally risk-free with our 30-day money-back guarantee and use our code ROCKETSLOT. You'll get 10% off your order. You just have to click on the link in the description, but also that supports our channel because they have a pretty awesome commission program for YouTubers like us. So it's like a double dip. You're supporting RocketSoft and getting some cool soap in return. All right, let's talk about some more games. Okay, we have 2 versions of Timesplitters 4 I want to talk about. Now, if you don't know what Timesplitters was, back in the day, it was a really, really cool FPS, single player mostly game, but it had a multiplayer component, of course. It was made by a lot of the people who worked on GoldenEye, and it's essentially a first-person shooter, but like you go with time travel elements, and essentially you go to different time periods for each set piece, and I loved that as a kid. That was such a cool idea. But after the third Timesplitters game, that was kind of it. But there are 2 different instances of Timesplitters 4 that were in active development. Both ended up getting canceled. And now we at least have an inside look as to what these canceled games look like all of these years later. Let's talk about the 2008 build of Timesplitters 4 first. Now, it seemed like the game was still in early development when Free Radical went under and essentially went into administration, which meant their active games were canceled. And nobody really knew how far along development was with Timesplitters 4 before it got canceled, or if anything was even really built for the game. Maybe they were just in the concept art phase of the game and nothing was really being built. However, in 2024 of all times, some user on Reddit posted that he had found some 2008 prototype game that he saw on eBay, and it was like 500 plus pounds or something, and he bought it, and sure enough, Timesplitters 4 was there on the PS3 developer kit. From there, the game would be shared online and people were able to explore it, and hey, I mean, it looks like the game was moving along for where this game was in development. I mean, there was a new level, new character models, there was like bots that were working, probably built off of Timesplitters 3, but hey, that's cool. And like the graphics actually look really good for a game that was still early in development. Also, along the way, there was content found in the files that was originally supposed to be in Timesplitters Future Perfect, the 3rd game, but were cut and still existed here. So look at that. We got even more info, and most importantly, history was preserved. It's a shame Timesplitters 4 got canceled. But then there was a plan to reopen the studio, Free Radical, and make a new Timesplitters 4 with some of the original developers. So that was cool. And then that got canceled. I was among the group of people who were heartbroken to hear that Timesplitters 4 was canceled again when the studio was shut down again. However, about a year ago, a sizzle reel showcasing gameplay and concepts for Timesplitters 4, which at the time was called Timesplitters Next, that was being in development up until just a couple of years ago, would surface online, and that revealed what this game would have looked like. And now my opinions changed a little bit because maybe we dodged a bullet by Timesplitters getting canceled again. I feel like this would have tarnished Timesplitters' reputation. Now, of course, this video was never meant for the public to ever see. This was supposed to be like for executives and, you know, other people within the industry to see what studio was working on. They were just reusing Fortnite assets to build this. I mean, obviously this is a very early sizzle reel, I'm guessing, but it's like unapologetically just Fortnite. And I get like they were still doing like conceptual work, but like they show off like worlds with lore and stuff in this sizzle reel. Like this is 2243 Machine Hive, and like if the gameplay in this prototype, whatever you want to call this showcase, looks like this, like they were really gonna lean into like this game needs to be our version of Fortnite, and I really don't like that. And yeah, there's traces of Timesplitters' soul in there. Maybe you could say that. Like, the monkey's there as a skin, and the location at the beginning that they show off, I think was a level in one of the previous Timesplitters games. Also, the text they show in the bottom corner just really irritates me more. Like, they are trying to sell a game. It just, oh my gosh, it just feels so tone deaf. Like, who are you trying to impress? Like, what executives are gonna watch this video and they're like, oh, there, right there, it says fast action shooting. Now I understand what I'm looking at. Like, I don't know, man, they gotta spell it out literally. In my mind, this should have been canceled before they had even built this far into it. I mean, I get prototyping's a thing, but this is already too far. They went already too far with this. And it's a shame. They should have been put in a different direction. I don't know who was in charge. I don't know who let this happen, but this wasn't it, Chief. Look, multiple game modes. What a feature. Solos, duos, trios, quads. It's got the open world, which is okay. Also, this would never actually happen this coordinated in a game. Like what? Like this would never happen in a real online game. I don't know. Oh, and don't worry, they didn't forget to include the season pass and store, showing that, you know, they're gonna have that stuff in here too. We can buy coins even. And the season pass and store are bursting with character. That also is literally the next caption. I cannot stand this. Oh my God. And then it ends with this whole loads of attitude screen. Now there is some useful info at the end of this though. First of all, they put a disclaimer that, you know, it was captured and recorded in-house on short notice. And this also has a date on it showing that this was the status snapshot of July 2023. And the company was shut down in November of that year. Listen, I hate hearing game development studios shutting down, but if I was in charge of deciding whether or not this project was continued, like, I don't know if I feel bad about saying like, this ain't it, this isn't good. And I guarantee you no one was supposed to ever see this. Nobody should ever have to see this, but we did. Okay, we need to talk about a canceled Avengers game. And we're not talking about the Avengers game from 2020 that got unlisted or delisted or shut down. I don't know the right term for this. And we're also not talking about the Avengers mobile game that also came out in 2012 to kind of, you know, ride off of the hype of the Avengers movie. There was an Avengers game that was being planned for the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Wii U, and Windows that ended up getting scrapped altogether that was being developed by THQ Studio Australia along with Blue Tongue Entertainment. And while yeah, this game obviously was being developed to try to ride off of the hype and to coincide with the release of the Avengers movie, the game wouldn't have been based off of the movie itself. It would have been its own standalone story based off of the Secret Invasion storyline in the comics. Now, majority of the game was being developed by THQ Studio Australia. However, there was some outsourcing done to Blue Tongue Entertainment, who we briefly mentioned earlier, and they were working on the PC version, and there were plans also for the Wii U version, which is crazy. And remember, this was also during the time where like Kinect was supposed to start becoming a thing. So there was a mode called Avengers Training Academy that was being planned to utilize the Kinect for the Xbox 360, but this project fell apart. In 2011, THQ was really struggling because Homefront wasn't doing well. That whole U-Draw peripheral, which cost the company apparently $100 million, wasn't doing well. And on top of that, Australia's economy was changing. Employees cost more money than before, and I guess THQ was really just bleeding money. So the game was already in trouble, and apparently the developers even made a last-ditch effort reaching out to Marvel, hoping that they would continue to fund development on the game. But Marvel was like, nah fam, we're good. And the project officially ended up getting canceled. Now, some of you might remember an Avengers game though still releasing around the time of the movie, and that's because after THQ fell through, they sold off their properties, and Ubisoft swooped in and acquired a license to make their own tie-in game that was completely unrelated to this Avengers game. And they did allegedly borrow some concepts, but that was that game called Marvel Avengers Battle for Earth that did come out on the Xbox 360 and Wii U. So there was that. But the game that originally was supposed to be there was actually widely unknown about for a really long time. Now, the footage you've been watching has been mostly from the 2011 build of the game, and while it still looks like it was in some of the earlier stages of game development, it looked like the core building blocks of the game was there. It just needed to be designed visually and polished up and stuff. But there was something here. They were working on the gameplay, and the game was going to have a focus on co-op. It could have been a really fun game, especially for the time when it would have released. The tone's actually a little bit darker than what you would expect from an Avengers styled game, and the fact that it leaned into first person was kind of unique here. I think that would have been really cool. I mean, look at the Hulk go. He's just doing his thing. I don't know. The fact that this was supposed to come out in 2012, and in a way, this early version of the game kind of still looks better than the 2020 version of Avengers we did get, makes me wonder what this game could have been like had it released. So damn, this one would have been nice.
Doom 64 feels like an alternate timeline Doom. Think about it. Doom was the PC game. It is basically the grandfather of first-person shooters with mouse and keyboard. And whenever Doom released on a console, it would just be a port, often like a diet version of the PC game with features and stuff removed. So why in the late 90s did Nintendo get a full brand new Doom game built specifically for the Nintendo 64 and exclusive to the system, not available anywhere else? Not a port, not Doom 1.5, not like Doom but it was an actual new entry with new levels, new tech, and different design choices that actually made it a very good game. And of course, there was some hardware limitations and cartridge limitations with the N64, but I just think it's such an interesting thing to exist, something that wouldn't happen today anymore. But the game did gain a cult following, and there was a lot of people interested in the development of Doom 64. And 6 years after the game released in 2003, people were still interested in Doom 64, and the website Firebrand X actually got the chance to do an interview with level designers Timothy Haydelar and Randy Estrella. God, I hope I didn't butcher those names. And during this interview, the developers were talking about how there is a secret in Doom 64 that nobody has found yet. They were giving some vague details, like they said it was on the level breakdown and there was some switches to hit an order, but they couldn't really remember it. It had been a long time since they worked on the game, so I guess those like small details do slip the mind. But I mean, as it goes, people start looking for it, and me and Elijah have been there too. Like, we did a whole video on like this Call of Duty 3 Easter egg for one of the DLC maps that might be in there, might not be in there, but the developers were talking about how it could exist. But as far as Doom 64 goes, they couldn't really find any Easter eggs or any new secrets that hadn't already been discovered. And it kind of became one of the unsolved mysteries of the Doom franchise. Until December 2022. When a prototype version of Doom 64 leaked on 4chan. This version had the title Evaluation Version, which most likely was used for internal testing, and there was some minor differences, like some levels weren't done, like the final level you couldn't finish it, and some other levels you also couldn't get out of, or the pickup icon for the chainsaw was like this weird little creeper looking thing. Like, this alpha prototype version was dated like 5-6 months before retail release, so it still had a couple months to get polished. But what was most interesting about this version is that on the level breakdown, there's actually an Easter egg that was not in the retail version. So basically, to get this Easter egg to show up, you have to shoot these very specific triggers in the map and, hit other switches. And it actually takes like a while and has like a couple steps to it. But once you do and you enter this room, there will be like this wall of arrows being shot at you, but they are actually displaying a message. And it's very hard to see because the arrows are just flying at you fast. But since this is a development version, there's actually a freeze play loop option in the developer submenu. So if you freeze it, you can actually read it. And it says S Heart C, which probably is a hidden message by one of the developers to their partner. And because of that, fittingly, this Easter egg was titled Love Letter. So yeah, there it is. 25 years later, it finally was discovered in this prototype build of Doom 64.
Okay, the next two I'm going to talk about, I'm not really 100% sure if they should count as like, the title of like prototypes we weren't supposed to see or whatever. But it's so interesting that I want to include it somewhere in this video because they're Nintendo titles. And with Nintendo, typically we don't get to see prototype builds. And while this was one that actually was like officially shown off at an event back at GDC in I think like 2017 or 2018, I'm pretty sure most people who are watching this video hasn't seen what early Splatoon and early ARMS looked like, and I think it's really interesting. Now, the Splatoon one has more views, but still, it's like sitting well under 100,000 views 7 years later after it being posted, and it's just cool to see footage from this presentation that shows like what the early stages of Splatoon look like. But I was more interested in the ARMS demonstration that they showed off also, which I don't know, look at this. This is kind of cool, right? To see this and then know that it turned into this, and then nobody played ARMS honestly like a month after it launched anyways, so I digress. Still, I love that we did get to see a snapshot of this, and since I feel like most people haven't seen these videos, I wanted to just show off some of the early prototype versions because I think it's fitting here. Now, there was a really big leak back in 2025, though, of a Nintendo developer kit that did reveal a couple of different builds for games that we never actually got to see. One of these games is a game that most people didn't even know existed, and was being developed by Retro Games. Now, Retro Games has a pretty long track record of making some bangers. They're responsible for the Metroid Prime series. They did Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, and after the release of Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, Retro Studios was actually working on a fresh IP that ultimately ended up getting canceled in 2017 by Nintendo, but they were working on something for Nintendo, and this was at the time called Harmony. Now, development for this game started off on the Wii U, but probably shifted over to Nintendo Switch, and while the builds that have released online are kind of like all over the place as to like what is in there content-wise, there is a lot of content here. which shows that the game was worked on for quite some time before it ended up getting canceled. Harmony is really interesting besides the fact that it never released and we know that it was being developed by a really big studio that has a pretty good track record. It is interesting to see the different builds. The last build that we have access to is a vertical slice that is speculated to have been like a fresh retake on the formula that they've been building for the game, and maybe an attempt to save the game project and shift things so that the game could continue to be supported. And there's also speculation that it was kind of intended to be for a younger audience. There's like this whole like musical aspect to the game and like a sing-along type thing, and people who've like dug into Harmony have noticed that this last development build, the one that I think is the most interesting here, was trying to dial more in the fact that it was going to be aimed at a younger audience. Ultimately got canceled. Now there are two other like earlier versions that had different progress made with them, and some of them are a little bit more like a typical platformer style of gameplay, but I don't think it was quite the heavy hitter that it needed to be to release. I mean, launching a new IP is expensive, even if this game was potentially in development for years before it ended up getting deleted out of existence. So yeah, it's cool. There's a lot of gameplay footage out there, and I think there might be a build floating around. I'm not 100% sure on that, but yeah, I think that's cool. Okay, I want to talk about the Ridge Racer series. What an interesting series. It was iconic for a while. I mean, who doesn't like a good old racing game, especially a classic that did stand the test of time for a while, but people were hoping Ridge Racer would finally make a return. Ridge Racer 8 had been speculated for a long time, and back in 2018, GameSpot even published an article suggesting Ridge Racer 8 was in development by Bandai Namco, because there was like a LinkedIn profile or something where like some developer had posted that they were working on Ridge Racer 8. I mean, that's like a good enough reason, right? Well, years after speculating that there was a Nintendo Switch Ridge Racer exclusive game on the way, it never ended up coming out. Where was it? But then, you know what? Bandai Namco didn't stop themselves there. They decided to add a little fuel to the fire, the speculative fire, I guess, in the form of Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown. Wait, what? Yes, in Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown, they hid an Easter egg alluding to the future of the Ridge Racer series. There is this billboard in the game here that advertises like a vehicle brand that I guess is like a Ridge Racer thing. I don't know the lore of like Ridge Racer, like super hardcore, but I guess the Tarazi is the manufacturer in the Ridge Racer universe. So, I mean, that's big, right? This is a big deal. It's here. Then in 2020, the same brand made an appearance on the CEDEC 2020 conference as part of an HDRI tech demo. That sounds really complicated, but I'm pretty sure it was just like a little snippet of the vehicle showing that, you know, because they were working on Ridge Racer, whether they wanted to officially announce it or not. And then nothing ever happened, ever. Fast forward years later, and last year in 2025, Bandai Namco Entertainment started some initiative to encourage the licensing of their IPs to other companies, and Ridge Racer was one of the titles that was like listed as a potential for the program, and then they removed that later on. So I don't know what was going on there. So what happened to Ridge Racer 8? It was in development, right? Well, finally last year, we found out that the Ridge Racer 8 game was a game that was in development, likely by Bandai Namco Singapore, and then somewhere along the way, the game ended up getting canceled. But a build in a Switch dev kit that leaked was discovered, and we now can actually see gameplay of Ridge Racer 8 that never even formally ended up getting announced, and looked like it was actually kind of far along. I mean, visually speaking, it does look relatively polished, though most of this is probably just building out the engine that would then be used to make new content for the game, as a lot of the things in the game are kind of like recycled assets from likely the 2011 game. But hey, it makes sense. They're trying to build something out so then they could build a new game likely. It looked like there was still a lot of work to do here. The game is very rough around the edges, and like, you know, Ridge Racer is known for having like an announcer during the countdown before the race starts. I mean, look at how it was in like one of the mainline games.
3, 2, 1, go!
And in this one, I think they're using like the Microsoft voice thing that's here.
3, 2, 1, go.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot. The game definitely is a little rough. I mean, look at, like, there's some goofy things that happen in here. There are some bugs. The lighting's a little weird. There's pop-ups and stuff. It's definitely maybe not the best prototype build, but this could have been a return to Ridge Racer, and that would have been really cool. So who knows? Maybe we'll eventually see a new Ridge Racer, but it's not going to be this one. And I don't know. I don't have an opinion on this one, really.
In the same Nintendo Switch dev kit that had Project Harmony and the Ridge Racer game on it, also had files for another prototype on it, and that prototype is called Lego Civilization. From the sounds of this, it could have been a pitch for maybe a Lego crossover with the Civ games, like, you know, those strategy games. Not 100% sure if that's what it is. There is actually not a lot known about this. And this is a super early prototype. Like, whenever someone records footage of this, it crashes every like 60 seconds. There's not much you can do in it either. Firstly, you play as Abraham Lincoln, which I guess would be fitting for that Lego Civ game theme crossover thing. And in multiplayer mode, there's other characters like Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, or Napoleon, which, you know, that's also fitting within the theme. I do want to point out that the game also opens up with text that says prehistory, but then loads you in as Abraham Lincoln, which I don't know how that fits together, but I guess so. The little gameplay you can do is like walking around in a small area and hit trees and rocks, I guess gather resources, and the map is actually grayed out around you, so I guess you're supposed to expand the map, which that's most likely where this would have gone, but it crashes, and I don't think you can actually walk out of this area. So, who the hell made this? It's actually not 100% confirmed who is behind this, so, you know, it's mostly speculation, at least as far as I can tell. But the best guess I've read online is that this was made by Nexon. The title screen includes a debug message, Nex Online Subsystem, which is an internal tool used by Nexon. So, you know, it would make sense if, you know, it's using Nexon systems. And this prototype is also dated 2016, which actually lines up with the time they were developing another Lego game that would actually release later on, which was the phone RPG Lego Quest and Collect, which would eventually release in 2017 and not even last for a year. But in 2016, while this prototype was made, they were probably working on Lego Quest and Collect, and, you know, they were making this prototype so they could secure more future Lego games. And knowing that the founder of Nexon is a big Lego fan, even used to own Bricklink until he sold it in 2019, and with all that in mind, to me, it kind of makes the most sense that Nexon made this. And then they pitched this prototype and didn't get picked up. Nonetheless, it is super unfinished, super buggy, and honestly, you can barely call this a game. But thanks to this like dev kit that got posted online, we now know that this did exist at some point in time, and we can look at it, which, you know, that's cool.
You guys remember the game Kameo and the Elements of Power? Interesting title of a game, but game made by Rare nonetheless. And Rare had a crazy track record during the Nintendo 64 era. It started back during the Super Nintendo eras when I felt like they really were starting to become a big name, especially with Donkey Kong Country. But the N64 era solidified their legacy with Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong 64, GoldenEye, Perfect Dark. I mean, man, they never missed. And all the way back, after the completion of Donkey Kong 64, Rare began working on Kameo. This was originally going to be an N64 game, but then it got moved to the GameCube, but then Microsoft acquired them, so then development got moved to the Xbox. And it looked like the game was likely going to eventually release on the Xbox, though during development, the game went through a few different stages and redesigns and whatnot. And while the game was mostly finished on the Xbox, with a build that was playable about 80% of the way and you could complete it beginning to end, Microsoft decided to allot more time for Rare to upgrade the game, develop it more, and make it a launch title for the Xbox 360 for 2005. Because remember, the 360 came out like a year before the PS3 and Nintendo Wii. The game launched, and I think this game kind of went under the radar. It was kind of forgotten about pretty quickly, and the reviews were a little bit all over the place, ranging from mid to really good. I think ultimately it is a good game, and it's co-op, so I mean, bonus points there, of course. But believe it or not, a few years ago, the build of the Xbox original game actually ended up leaking online. And to this day, anybody who has an original Xbox, usually I think you have to have at least the upgraded RAM, which is really easy to do, can essentially play through Kameo Elements of Power for the original Xbox, that original version, start to finish. Now, it is worth noting that for the most part, the games are pretty similar, but there are some pretty noticeable differences. I mean, like, there's no multiplayer mode in the Xbox original version, and the graphics are quite a bit, you know, lower in quality. There's also some features that hadn't been implemented yet. Also, there's like an intro cinematic that uses the older models of the characters. It looks like really older versions, so possibly GameCube era models of the characters before a lot of redesigns compared to what we got in the retail version of the game. But also, if you just look at like side-by-side images of this prototype build versus the final retail build, you can see that the jump to the Xbox 360 made the game look visually different. I don't know, the original Xbox version has a little bit of a charm to it. I don't know, I feel like the face looks more symmetrical. I don't know what the right word is, but there's something going on with the face across these two versions that I think I like the older one better. I think this game would have done really well on the original Xbox as far as like expectation. I think the game would have probably reviewed better had it been an Xbox original game, but as a launch title for the Xbox 360, a first party one at that, I think the stakes are really high. And Rare had 2 launch titles for the Xbox 360. They had this and Perfect Dark Zero. And I think neither of these games lived up to the expectation people had for Rare. So this was the beginning of the end for them before their later on Sea of Thieves resurgence post-Connect era that they went through. So I don't know.
Next, we're gonna dust off an old prototype leak all the way back from 2008, when a prototype appeared online for a cancelled Sega Genesis / Mega Drive game called Slam Shaq vs. the Legends. This was a Shaquille O'Neal branded basketball game for, as I said, the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive, where you could have 2-on-2 matches with various legendary players, like, you know, there's Larry Bird right here or Magic Johnson. The game was in development around 1995 to 1996 at Tiburon Entertainment and was gonna be published by EA. While it is a prototype, it's actually pretty far along. Like, there's 2 different modes, pickup games and like a tournament mode, and there's even some voice clips of Shaquille O'Neal that are already in the game. And honestly, like, I played it and I suck at these basketball games. I'm pretty sure one of the games I played, I lost like 0 to 30. I just couldn't figure out the controls. Nonetheless, in 1996, the game was cancelled and it never released. And it wasn't like much reported on back in the day, even though I think EA did vaguely announce it in some earnings reports and stuff back in 95. But the game only became widely known about once it was leaked in 2008. And while EA didn't make an official statement on cancelling this or why they cancelled this, there's a couple reasons why they most likely decided to cancel this. Firstly, by 1996, the shift to the 32/64-bit era, defined by the PlayStation, the N64, and the Sega Saturn, was accelerating in the industry. As a result, a lot of publishers halted their projects for older generations like the Genesis and the SNES, choosing instead to redirect their resources toward developing for the new 3D hardware. Secondly, Tiburon Entertainment also started taking over the development of Madden NFL in 1995, and then shortly after that also became the main developer for college football, which later would be renamed to NCAA football and now is back as EA Sports College Football. So they were pretty busy with these 2 big franchises. And fun fact, they're actually still developing Madden and college football to this day. Like in 1998, EA just straight up bought the studio and renamed it to EA Tiburon before they were recently renamed to EA Orlando. But it's still that same studio dating back all the way to 1995. Anyways, probably the biggest reason for the cancellation of Slam Shaq vs. the Legends was that EA had just seen success with their new NBA Live franchise developed by EA Canada, and Shaq was even the cover star for the 96 version. And looking back at the year 1996 specifically, it's insane how many official NBA games were released that year. There was NBA Jam Extreme, NBA Full Court Press, NBA Action, NBA Shootout, NBA Live 97, NBA In the Zone 2, and NBA Hang Time. That is 7 games officially licensed by the NBA. 7 in 1 year. I'm not even accounting for games that didn't have the NBA license, like Slam and Jam 96 featuring Magic and Kareem. The point is, the market was insanely oversaturated with basketball games at the time, so the fact that they could even get a foothold with NBA Live in the first place was already an insane success. So putting out another NBA game just didn't make any sense. And probably we can't pinpoint it to just one reason. It's probably a little bit of all of these reasons coming together, and then they decided to just cancel it and move on. Reflecting on this game though, I noticed it's the second time I've covered a Shaq-themed game in recent videos. That kind of makes me wonder if there's any other Shaquille O'Neal-themed video games that I don't know about yet. Oh well, I'm sure they'll come up at some point.
Back in the day when the Tony Hawk series launched in the late 90s, it became a huge deal. And following Tony Hawk Pro Skater, a ton of other extreme sports games would release from various different publishers. There was like Matt Hoffman, Pro BMX. Then there was Kelly Slater's Pro Surfer. Did anybody actually play this? There was Aggressive Inline. Blockbuster had that scooter game with Razor scooters. And while Activision was very involved with a lot of these types of games, there was another company that was trying to also capitalize on the extreme sport craze of the late 90s, early 2000s, and that was publisher Acclaim. And they had the Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX series. Sure, they didn't have the rights to Matt Hoffman, but they had Dave Mirra. And 2 Dave Mirra games did end up releasing, Freestyle BMX and Freestyle BMX 2. But this is where things get very interesting, because there were plans for a Freestyle BMX 3, but a while back, a weird prototype ended up getting leaked for a game titled Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 4. So this is confusing, and there's not a lot of like official documentation to suggest what exactly happened, and there's no like interviews from anybody who was there firsthand. So we are going to have to speculate a little bit as to what's going on here. But essentially, there was a Freestyle BMX 3 that ended up releasing with the Dave Mirra tag on it, except weirdly enough, this third game in the series only released on the Game Boy Advance. There was no regular console version of this game. There was development for a Dave Mirra Freestyle BMX 3 at some point, but with finances getting tight for both Acclaim and the developer Z-Axis, the decision to pivot a little bit during development of this third game ended up really doing something weird. I guess Grand Theft Auto was becoming really popular, so they decided to like insert more mature humor and maybe some nudity here and there to try to up the sales and interest in a game like this. Essentially, they initially announced Dave Mirra BMXXX, but then they decided to drop Dave Mirra altogether. It became BMX XXX, and then there was like a whole lawsuit, like a defamation thing. It was a big old mess. I don't even think a lot of the developers were really happy with the decision to pivot and have to work on a game like this instead. I think this decision ended up backfiring though pretty heavily. Not only did Acclaim spend $3 to $4 million advertising the game, and they had like these weird jokes like this is BMX, but then with the marketing push that they did, Walmart, Toys R Us, and KB Toys decided not to stock the title of the game, and losing Walmart was a pretty big hit. So let's fast forward to this weird build of BMX 4, the Dave Mirra game here, and there's a prototype that leaked quite a while back, but still we have this prototype of a BMX game that's still taglined as Dave Mirra, and the build date dates all the way back to November of 2002, the same month that BMX XXX released. So what's going on here? I think big picture, maybe internally they kept a version of the game that was going to be BMX 3, and maybe towards the time that BMX XXX or whatever, however many X's there are in it, when that game went gold, maybe the development studio just started working on business as normal and maybe used their build of the BMX 3 game, renamed it to BMX 4, and started working on prototyping for a potential future game. There wouldn't be one, but that's my theory right now as to what this is. And for it to be called BMX 4 and to have a build date of essentially before BMX XXX, which was essentially the BMX 3 game, ended up releasing, it just seems to line up weirdly. So I think there's some information that we are lacking out there, but I'm pretty sure this is actually a build of BMX 3, not BMX 4, but maybe they like renamed stuff internally because the game already had pivoted, so there wasn't going to be a console version of BMX 3, and build date seems to line up with that theory. I don't know. I mean, maybe you guys have inside knowledge out there, or you can speculate for us, but let us know what you think in the comments about this one. All right, let's do a really quick one. Grand Theft Auto 3. GTA 3 was a really big deal in 2001 when it released. It was the first 3D Grand Theft Auto game. It was set in a city based on New York City, and the game was a massive success, launching the franchise to a brand new level of success that I don't think Rockstar had ever seen prior. That being said, before there was Grand Theft Auto Chinatown Wars for the DS, or Grand Theft Auto Vice City Stories and Liberty City Stories, or even Grand Theft Auto Advance, a GTA game that a lot of people don't even know exists, there was Grand Theft Auto 3 for the Game Boy Advance. This was being developed by a studio called Crawfish Interactive, and while it was reported that this game was moving along in development and would have of course had the more top-down style that we're familiar with from the older Grand Theft Auto games, the game never came into fruition, and ultimately the studio would shut down before GTA 3 for the Game Boy Advance would ever release. So when that project got canned, Rockstar instead approached Digital Eclipse, and they began work on a Grand Theft Auto game that would just end up being Grand Theft Auto Advance, not Grand Theft Auto 3 for the Game Boy Advance. And yeah, that was like the first handheld GTA game, and it was okay. I don't think it was like the best thing ever, but I mean, it wasn't like the worst thing ever. I think it was like mixed, but slightly better than bad. It looked like an old GTA game. I don't know.
I want to take you on a journey. Close your eyes and imagine this. You are a Nintendo executive in the late 90s and early 2000s. You're trying to think really hard about what gamers like to do, and all of a sudden you hear a voice in your head and it whispers, sewing machines.
Hell yeah, brother. I have the perfect idea.
Okay, perfect. And I mean, I don't know if that's what happened, but that's the only way I can explain why they made Mario Family, which was a Game Boy Color game that is compatible with specifically the Jaguar JN100 computerized sewing machine that released in 2001.
Did this sell well?
Well, no, it actually did not sell well.
I can't believe it.
They showed this off at Space World, and it was low-key a shadow drop. Like, they showed it off over 3 days at Space World 2001, and then the day after, they dropped Mario Family. They also showed off a Kirby version of it, and that was supposed to release 2 weeks later. But Mario Family did so bad that within these 2 weeks, they decided to just shelve Kirby Family completely. Like, the game was never released. And the Space World 2001 version actually wasn't quite done yet. And later on, a version that was, you know, probably the retail version or closer to the retail version leaked, that was slightly different. I mean, calling this a game is really like reaching, right? You just have a title screen and then you select motifs while you have it plugged into the sewing machine, and then it'll like stitch whatever you selected. Like there's like 30-ish things you can select from Mario or Kirby in this case. Kirby Family used a remix of a Kirby 64 The Crystal Shard song that can only be found in this version. So once this leaked, you know, people had access to this remix.
That's so wild to me. Because Crystal Shards came out in 2000, right? So it's just weird to me, like, there's a Game Boy Color game coming out in 2001. Like, in general, that's always weird to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it happened, but like, why did it keep happening?
Yeah, I think you could also put this in your Game Boy Advance and then hook up your Game Boy Advance to the sewing machine. But like, you know, why? Like, were they thinking like kids were gonna be like, Mommy, I want a sewing machine for Christmas? And I do wonder how little Mario Family must have sold. Like, it must have sold literally like 2 copies or something for them to decide to just cancel a game that was essentially done like in 2 weeks. I don't know. It's just a weird thing to exist.
Didn't, what's his name, Retro Future, do a video with it at some point?
Yes, I think he did one with the Mario Family and the sewing machine. I mean, I'm sure the sewing machines are a collector's item. Actually, I didn't look them up on eBay, but yeah, these sewing machines range from $600 to $1,300.
Should we get one?
I mean, yeah.
Tax write-off. It's a business expense, probably not a smart business expense.
What about Mario Family?
How much is that game? $2,700.
Okay, I actually did find one for $30 plus $18 shipping.
Oh, I guess the one I was looking at was complete in box, because I'm not a scrub.
Oh yeah, this is just like a weird game, and I mean, it's just kind of forgotten.
They should bring it back. Dude, when are they going to add Mario Family to the Nintendo Online service?
Never, but they should partner up with a 3D printer company and then make a Switch game that lets you 3D print Mario. How about that? And then nobody's gonna buy that.
Dude, do you think they're going to bring Face Raiders back for the 3DS?
It's Face Raiders.
It's like a game where you like use the camera and play like augmented reality, and you're like, the 3DS launch was really a bad time. This is like what we had to play. I bought a 3DS at launch. I traded in like all my Pokemon games and my DS for the 3DS, and then played Face Raiders for like an hour, and then was really disappointed. I didn't trade in all my Pokemon games, just my old ones.
Oh, that's even worse.
Which was worse. Yeah.
That's even worse. I don't know. I don't think I got a DS until the 2DS came out with the Alpha, Omega, Ruby, Sapphire thing.
Oh, you got them real late.
But I mean, I had a DS. I was just happy with my DS, I guess. I need this other stuff.
You didn't play X and Y at launch?
No, I actually never played X and Y. Well, I played a little bit and then put it down after I had my 2DS, but
well, dude, you gotta play it now. Haven't you been getting into DS gaming lately?
Yeah, I'm playing stuff with 64 first, and then I want to play Ocarina of Time. So, and then I want to play Black and White.
How far are you on Star Fox 64?
I'm on the 4th level, I guess.
So wait, you're on the 4th level, Sector X.
But I didn't do any of the objectives, right? So like, I'm just in the standard route.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. So you did the snow level. Wait, that's the 3rd level. Yeah, you did the snow level, right?
Yeah, and then before that was the, what were the monkeys?
And you ran out of time, I'm guessing, on the Star Wolf one?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, because that's how you get the bad, or is it a bad route? What do you call it? Like slow route?
The completed route versus the accomplished route. You have to kill all of Star Wolf to get the other route.
I guess I'll have to replay it sometime.
Sorry, we get sidetracked here a lot.
While we're on the topic of like crappy 3DS software. The Nintendo DSi also existed, and it also had a camera. EA at some point wanted to make a photo journaling app called EA Create Snap, and that prototype leaked last year, and there's really not much to it. They didn't even implement the photo function, like you can't actually take photos. I mean, you can save like Plex screens, I guess, and name them, but there isn't really anything. And I think the whole point of this was like to give people like inspiration, or like, you know, teenagers and kids to give them inspiration, like to get into photography. And it would give you like prompts like, take a picture of something that reminds you of a dream, and then you can put it in your journal. And I don't know, it's just like a really weird concept. And this prototype was developed by Barking Lizard Technologies, which was an independent studio that mostly made shovelware games during the 2000s and early 2010s. But EA was behind this, and they funded it, and they were like, oh, this is a good idea, and that's why it's called EA Create Snap. It's just a weird thing. I don't know. Like, we didn't even know about this until it was randomly leaked. Like, I don't know. It's just another weird DS photo thing.
You know what I just realized?
Yeah.
Remember how yesterday we were recording and we talked about Starfox and that prototype that isn't in the video yet?
Yeah.
Maybe since we were just talking about Starfox a second ago, we should just segue into a recording from a day ago and put the Starfox part here instead of doing it in chronological recording order. So let's talk about what we talked about when we talked about Starfox now. Okay, do I do the straightforward version of this next game, or do we go the roundabout way of talking about this, but also plugging some other interesting things?
I mean, yeah, just, just go all out, I guess.
Okay, so for the last month, Luke and I have been thoroughly investigating the furry community, just for fun. No, I'm just kidding. Side note, we've been playing VR chat, and there's a ton of furries on there, and it can be really, really weird. But we've been posting some of our experiences on our other channel called Awful VR. There's some good videos on there. That's the only plug we're going to do. But while we're on the topic of furries, we have to talk about Starfox, a video game series that launched the furry community. I mean, I don't think it was directly related to the thing, but I mean, it's around the same time, right? Should we blame Starfox for it? Do we credit Starfox for it, or do we blame them for it?
I think it just like made it worse.
Yeah, Mickey Mouse has been doing it for much longer, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's other things.
In our other video that's 3 hours long, we talked about Dinosaur Planet, a game that was being made for the Nintendo 64. It was being developed by Rare, had nothing to do with Star Fox, and then Nintendo was like, that kind of looks like our character though, why don't you make it a Star Fox game? Then boom, the game was reworked. It was on the GameCube, Star Fox Adventures, but the old Dinosaur Planet prototype did eventually surface, and you could play through some of it. I tried playing through it, and I couldn't figure out how to get the controls to work, so I gave up, but other people have figured out how to play more of it. That's not what we're talking about though, because Star Fox has something else that nobody ever talks about, I feel like. Did you ever hear of an old game from 1986 called Snesglider?
No, and on the Bible, I've never heard of this game.
Aren't you in for a treat? All the way back in 1984, a game called Skyline Attack released for the Commodore 64, and this was a game developed by Argonaut Games. After that game released, two popular games would release in 1986 and 1988, known as Starglider and Starglider 2. If you're getting the vibe that I'm trying to portray here, this would essentially be the predecessor to what would eventually become Star Fox. With these games under their belt, in 1990, Argonaut started working alongside Nintendo on a couple of different little projects. There's some interesting lore there. I think they were even trying to help make a proof of concept method for getting around the Game Boy's copyright protection and like show it to Nintendo. But like they had this weird working relationship. I mean, I guess it wasn't that weird, but it was a working relationship. Nonetheless, with Argonaut having their foot in the door with their homies at Nintendo, they started kind of playing around with some potential game ideas. And essentially there was a prototype that would eventually become Star Fox, which was codenamed Snesglider, which essentially was inspired by Starglider back on the Atari and Amiga. There was a prototype of this game that was running on the NES. Later on, the development and prototyping would continue onto the Super Nintendo. Long story short, they were trying to do the 3D stuff with the Super Nintendo. They got the whole Super FX chip specifically built so that Star Fox could become a game and be a playable 3D game on Super Nintendo hardware. And eventually in 1993, Star Fox would release. But when that big Giga leak happened, we actually got access to a prototype build of Star Fox from 1992, back before the game was even called Star Fox, before Fox was put in the game, before any of the furries were put in the game, but they were still like kind of far along on developing things. I mean, the game's still very, very early, but there's more than just like a proof of concept here. There is full-fledged gameplay here. You get to fly a ship, shoot stuff. That's pretty cool. I think this predates Starfox, like before they decided to put the furry things in it, the Starfox things in it. I know it sounds like I'm like very hateful towards Starfox. I love Starfox. It's like one of my favorite video game series. I grew up with Starfox 64. So I'm allowed to criticize the furry aspect of the games a little bit, I think. And honestly, I'm a little tilted because the furries on VR chat are weird. Like they are not normal. I have not had a good experience yet in like a normal experience. We're getting off track. Nonetheless, this prototype did end up surfacing in that Giga leak, and people were able to recompile the game, and now people can play it. It is interesting because some of the stages that did end up being in the main Star Fox game are present here, though a lot of the layouts are quite a bit different, and some early versions of boss fights that would eventually make their way into the final game are there as well, but this is still a very early build. But it's cool because in general, before that big Giga leak happened, we never really got a lot of like insight as to what some of the development stages in Nintendo games in general kind of looked like. This was back when Argonaut was doing Star Fox stuff. Remember, after this, they did other games, but when it came to Nintendo, they had worked on Star Fox 2, and then that game got canceled after the game was done. It didn't release until like 2017. And then they kind of just stopped working directly with Nintendo most of the time. They went on to do the Croc games. That was cool.
Was it cool though?
No. They started kind of shutting down in like 2004, and they were fully dissolved by 2007. And then they were resurrected in 2024, but I think it's mostly just to re-release games that they already had, like Croc.
What if they go back to Star Fox now, you know?
I don't know if Nintendo, I mean, maybe. They didn't do Star Fox 64, and I feel like that's the best one. So they just did the original two. There was also allegedly a Yoshi game they were working with Nintendo on.
Actually, I know this recording is a couple days later than when we just talked about Star Fox, but I learned about another recently found Argonaut games prototype that revealed a cancelled Crash vs. Spyro racing game. It's a pretty interesting story, actually. So, YouTuber Modern Vintage Gamer found this on an OG Xbox development kit that had some other prototypes on it. I think one of them was like for Fast and Furious, or like games that were released, right? And there was a file called LT Demo. This was the prototype of Crash vs. Spyro Racing, which was not widely known about publicly before he made this video, as far as I can tell. I think there was some posts about it like back in the day, like really like scarce. This is just a basic kart racer, and it's a pretty short demo, and most likely was just a pitch, though it could have been a canceled project too. We just don't know. And at first, when you look at the game, there's nothing really that looks like anything from the Crash or Spyro universe, but as you drive along the track, you run into these crates, and those would have been like their version of the question mark blocks from Mario Kart, and they are the crates from Crash Bandicoot, and they actually make the noise that they would make in the Crash Bandicoot games. Alas, once Modern Vintage Gamer dug into the files, he found more evidence that this was actually a Crash vs. Spyro racer, along with an intro video that shows Crash and Spyro racing alongside each other. And there's actually a little more to this, and he did some digging to figure out who developed this. And then, you know, as I said earlier, it was Argonaut games, but you know, the whole story is interesting, so if you want to know more, you should check out the video.
Now, was there any connection with this game to like Crash Team Racing? Because this was later, right? What year was the build from?
Build is from 2004.
It had to have been a sequel then to Crash Team Racing, right?
I mean, maybe, yeah.
Or at least like a spiritual sequel with CTR coming out in what, 99?
It could have very well been, right?
Wait, wasn't there another Crash Bandicoot game though around that time? Like a racing game? Crash Tag Team Racing, which came out in 2005. Universal had the publishing rights. So my theory, based on what you've explained, is that probably sometime before 2005, Vivendi was shopping around a developer for a Crash racing game, maybe, or you know what I mean, something along those lines. And they probably had a couple of potential developers make pitches, and maybe this was one of them, but instead they turned it down and went with Radical Entertainment, who did Crash Tag Team Racing. Either that, or maybe they were shopping around a developer for another racing game after Crash Tag Team Racing. There was another Crash racing game called Nitro Kart. It came out in 2003. So there was already 3 games in total. So I guess depending on when exactly that build was from, not just, we would have more information on that. But it is interesting.
I did not realize there was this many Crash Bandicoot racing games.
I knew there was a couple, but I didn't realize there was 3. During this time, weren't they already doing a lot of stuff with Spyro and Crash? They did the handheld games, the Game Boy Advance games. They did like how Pokemon has like red and blue. They did a Crash and Spyro handheld duo of games. Did you ever see those games back in the day?
Wait, that's actually crazy. They were just straight up copying Pokemon. Yeah.
They were just like throw in their two IPs, doing a purple and orange version. They're the same game pretty much, I think. I haven't played them, to tell you the truth.
Do you think there's people who were like, oh, I want both versions of this?
I mean, I'm sure that obviously people still to this day buy both Pokemon games at launch. They're literally the same game.
Yeah. This was called Crash Bandicoot Fusion and Spyro Fusion. So they didn't even do the purple and orange thing. So that's why I probably never seen this.
You know, it's so weird the like influence that doing two versions of Pokemon ended up having because of how successful red and green and then blue and yellow were.
Yeah.
Because like I think they did it with Legend of Zelda also at one point, didn't they? With Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. And that one's interesting. I know we're getting off topic, but it's interesting because these are not the same game. Where the other games we're talking about, like there's a little bit of differences here and there, but more or less it's the same experience. Where Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons are like two separate stories. I think the layouts are different and one takes place before the other. So it's almost like just two different games. I mean, the assets are similar. Obviously they were developed during the same time. And then I think there's like a final ending that you get in the game by like using a code, or you have to like link like a passcode from one of the other games to get like a final ending, or use two Game Boys. I don't remember, but it's something like that. And then they never did it again afterwards because this is like a lot of extra steps for a game.
I think Fire Emblem did this on the 3DS era.
Digimon did the Dusk and Dawn on the DS? They were kind of late to the party. I feel like everyone experimented with that during the Game Boy era, and then like Digimon showed up during the DS era thinking it would work. Now in this video, Call of Duty doesn't have the most representation because we've covered Call of Duty prototypes so extensively in the past. In our other video, we talked about games like Call of Duty Phantoms and Call of Duty Future Warfare, game prototypes that are just really fascinating to look at. And we've done an entire video on cut content of Call of Duty where we looked at all of the old builds of older Call of Duties, like old builds, like forks of COD 4 that were used for World at War. I mean, even the early Call of Duty 4 in itself was really interesting, and there's just a lot of interesting stuff across the board. But I did want to at least give Call of Duty a mention here because of how important of a series it was. And while we have talked about these following ones before, we'll just briefly talk about them again, I guess. One of the wild Call of Duty games that was prototyped was a Call of Duty game known as Call of Duty Roman Wars. And there's prototype footage out there, which is just pretty wild to me that this was going to have the Call of Duty tagline if it was greenlit for production. I don't think it was. I think it was just greenlit for a prototype and then it died there. But there was also another game called Call of Duty Tactics, which I feel like not a lot of people remember or even know about. And it would have been a pretty different style of Call of Duty. And then one of my personal favorites goes all the way back to the glory era of Call of Duty. But there was a Call of Duty game that was in full-on development called Call of Duty Devil's Brigade. While the game would have had a focus on third-person gameplay being new, there was still first-person, and it seemed like it would have been another return to World War II, which would have been pretty cool. It would have taken place in Italy, and there would have been like this whole squad element to the game. It was being developed by Underground Development, which would have been interesting just because they hadn't done a Call of Duty before. They don't have like the biggest track record either before they ended up closing down altogether. It's probably likely to the fact that when Modern Warfare was just blowing up and Modern Warfare 2 was in development, Activision probably realized that they don't need to lean too much into World War II for Call of Duty anymore, and the project wasn't far enough along. And I guess they could save money if they just canceled the project outright. So in 2008, Activision ended up closing down Underground Development. They only had like 45 or so employees, but it is interesting that this team was assigned a Call of Duty game at one point. Okay, real talk here. The Lion King was kind of an awesome movie. I still think it's like the pinnacle of Disney movies, but people will disagree with me. Yeah, I don't care. The Lion King is a banger. And of course, in the early 90s, there were Lion King tie-in video games to release, but some of them were actually kind of good. Back in 2011, when they did the 3D re-release of The Lion King and the movie was back in theaters, I think I went and actually saw it twice, neither times in 3D. But I was just like feeling nostalgic. I was in high school and I was like, it's The Lion King. And it was really easy to convince friends to go see The Lion King in movie theaters because like that's just like a crazy premise in itself, right? And I fell down this like rabbit hole of trying out some of the Lion King games. The Super Nintendo one is pretty interesting though. There's a lot of like different gameplay elements here, but it's mostly a platformer, but a competent one at that. And over the years, there have been different prototype builds of this game when it was still in progress. But in 2024, a surprise build of The Lion King, March 22nd, 1994, which was like 3 months before the movie came out, but still 9 months before the game came out. This ended up surfacing, and it's interesting to see a very early build of this game. And there's quite a bit of differences between this version of the game and even other prototypes that would leak that were from different stages later on in development. And I just think it's interesting to see a game this early. Like, obviously there's some, similarities to what the final version would end up looking like, but things are still very much so being constructed at this point in time. I mean, even Simba's sprite is not a lion. Like, what am I looking at here? The last 2 levels aren't even designed yet. They're just blockouts. It almost looks like something out of an early Mario game or something. But by far, what I think is the most fascinating to look at is the Stampede section of the game, because this is a very early build of what the Elephant Stampede would be in the final release. I mean, look at these things side by side. I mean, Simba's really cursed, right? For a Super Nintendo game, he shouldn't look like this. I mean, he wasn't the best looking in the final version, but this is something else. I don't know. In 2015, there was a build of this game that did end up leaking also, but this build was still further along than the one we just looked at. And it is interesting though, at least this version of the game had a sprite for Simba. They would redraw that sprite again before the final launch of the game, but this looks a little bit closer, even if it still looks not the best.
Okay, so this one is just a real quick one, but I just wanted to throw it in here. Sly Cooper, from all the way back in the day, does have a prototype build of the game that they showed off at E3 that was compiled in 2002. It's interesting. It is limited on how much is actually in the game, but there are quite a few differences. So if you're ever curious on Sly Cooper and different things like that. Voice acting is different. Some of the character models are different. One that comes to mind is the character Carmelita. She looks like this. And you side by side.
I never really played the Sly Cooper games.
Me neither. I played a little bit, but you'll be able to tell the difference here right away.
All I know is that people were disappointed by the last one that released years later, right?
The PS3, was it?
Yeah, maybe.
So this character is a character called Carmelita. My Sly Cooper knowledge is very limited, but the prototype version of the game has her in a cutscene looking like this. She's got red lipstick on. Yeah, and I think Sly wants to bang her or something, but I don't know the lore. I don't know if that's true. Don't quote me on it. If you know Sly Cooper, someone fill me in the comments, because I don't know. I wasn't even gonna talk about this one, but I was I should mention it for the Sly Cooper fans. The voice acting's different though. Here's a quick clip of what it sounds like.
Carmelita, I haven't seen you since I gave you the slip in Bombay.
That's Inspector Carmelita Fox. And by the way, you dirty thief, you need to return the Far Stone of India to its rightful owners.
Carmelita, I haven't seen you since I gave you the slip in Bombay.
Which reminds me, you need to return the Firestone of India to its rightful owners.
There you go.
Someone make a quote, a picture of Elijah. Sly Cooper wants to fire, I think. Don't quote me on that.
I don't think I said it like that. Did I? Is that how I said it?
I think you said bang.
The gaslighting is real, dude.
Does anyone here remember the Mercenaries series? It was a random new IP that appeared in the mid-2000s and got 2 games. First, Mercenaries Playground of Destruction in 2005 for PS1 and OG Xbox, and then Mercenaries 2 World in Flames in 2008 for PC, PS2, PS3, and Xbox 360. And the developer behind these 2 games was actually Pandemic Studios, who are well known for Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, or other games like Destroy All Humans. Most memorable about these games is probably the real-life controversies they caused. The first one takes place in North Korea, so it got banned in South Korea, and the second one takes place in Venezuela, during truck wars and stuff, so it was controversial there as well. But the first game was actually pretty good. It was a fun game, it reviewed well, and I think it's just a forgotten PS2 and OG Xbox classic. And the second game was kind of meh, and it didn't review that well, and they actually had plans for Mercenaries 3, but Pandemic Studios closed down before any of that could get really far. And with that, the franchise has been dead ever since, and I don't see anyone reviving this. And last year, files from a CD-ROM that was found were posted online, and on that CD-ROM there's 2 different prototype builds for the first game, Mercenaries Playground of Destruction. And these prototypes revealed that Mercenaries wasn't the initial plans for this, but instead, it started out as a reboot for something completely unrelated. At first, this started out as a sequel/reboot of an old 1992 game called Desert Strike. And Desert Strike is actually part of the Strike franchise, which got a few games in the early to late 90s and is owned by EA. And they go through different war settings across their games, and then they teased a futuristic setting at the end of the last one and canceled that, and then turned it into a different game called Future Cop LAPD, which never got a sequel or anything. It's just a forgotten series. I don't know. I don't think many people played this, at least nobody my age or younger. So the series officially ended in 1997 or 1998 if you want to half count the Future Cop LAPD game. And around 2002, Pandemic was prototyping a potential reboot or sequel for the very first game in the series. And this prototype is very bare bones. This was in July of 2002. There's one level, there is no main menu, you just get dropped in as a helicopter and then you get to fly around and blow up stuff. The setting is like Middle Eastern, which does line up with Desert Strike, and there's objectives and missions you can complete, but if you do them all, nothing happens. Like there's no way to enter level, I think. Also, I played this and I think I died, and the only way of telling if you died or not is the top left of your screen saying you died, but I never actually died, so I don't know. And while this was a 2002 build, the CD-ROM actually also had a 2003 build on it, which was September 2003 to be exact, which is more than a year later, but also still more than a year away from Mercenaries Playground of Destruction's launching. And now the game is called Brokat, which is Russian for rent or hire, so I guess maybe the English title would have been rent or hire. I guess mercenaries are people that you rent or hire, so I don't know. And the game is actually quite different. Now it's a third-person shooter, and the setting is already changed from the Middle East to North Korea. It is further along, but still very unfinished and buggy at the same time. It plays pretty good though, and you can explore the map and get on vehicles and drive around, pick up different weapons, do missions and stuff like that. And there's even like voice acting, and I mean, I think it's just the devs recording the lines, but nonetheless it's pretty funny. But yeah, obviously this 2003 build is drastically different than the 2002 version. They already moved away from the Desert Strike thing, and now they're moving more into a open playground like shooting type game. And then over the next year of development, this would turn into the game that we got, Mercenaries Playground of Destruction. And I mean, it's not quite clear why they shifted away from the Desert Strike project. Maybe they pitched it and the EA didn't want anything to do with it, and then they reworked it into a different pitch, which is a Brokat game, and then they pitched that around, and then at some point LucasArts picked up the publishing rights and it turned into the first Mercenaries game. But like, I can't be sure that the plans for calling it Mercenaries wasn't already like in the works at the time this Brokat build was. I think there's still a lot of details on what exactly happened missing, but at the end of the day, we can see now that it started out as Desert Strike and then became a third-person shooter set in North Korea, and then finally became Mercenaries Playground of Destruction. And we were never supposed to see any of this or play any of this, but now we can, thanks to the leaks from last year, and that's pretty cool.
One of my favorite things to do, that sounds bad. It's not like one of my favorite things to do. It's not like in a top 3 thing I do every day type thing. But like something from time to time I like to think about. You know how Nintendo has like this crazy roster of IPs and then they all come together in Super Smash Bros, right?
Yeah.
And then like PlayStation has a pretty good roster of IPs, and they did a fighting game one time, but like you think of like PlayStation IPs and you can think of like a pretty large list of characters, right? And if they were to ever do another game like was it PlayStation All-Stars, or wasn't it called something like that? Battle Royale or something?
Battle Royale All-Stars? That sounds right.
If they were to do another one, you can imagine what characters they would use for it. Then I think about Xbox. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Because like, sure, you could think of some obvious ones, like they would throw Master Chief in. They probably would pull out some dead IPs that they have in their pocket, like Banjo-Kazooie. We've got the Sea of Thieves pirate. Lynx would probably show up. There was one more. Oh, Joanna Dark, even though they canceled her game. Then there'd be some goofy ones, right? Because they're going to have to fill the roster one way or another. And it's like, we're running out of ideas here. Are we going to get the plane from Flight Simulator? Are we going to get a car from Forza? Like, how do you represent those franchises, right? But then, if we look even further back at Microsoft's like catalog of IPs that they own, there's an IP from way back in the day that they just haven't used. And that's the game Black and White. You ever played that game? Or do you know of it?
Oh, wait. Is it? Do you play God in it or something?
Yeah, it's like a God sim. Yeah. It's by Lionhead Studios, the same studio that does Fable, and I'm assuming Peter Molyneux.
Project Milo. Don't forget the greatest achievement, Project Milo, dude.
Dude, so good. Have you seen his TED Talk on it?
I think so, yeah, because we did a video on him, or
so
we did a big part of him.
It's crazy that there's a TED Talk on Project Milo, period. Yeah. Nonetheless, Black and White is a crazy IP that Microsoft doesn't do anything with, because I think if they gave it to like the right studio and they didn't like try to scale it too largely, they could probably do a really good like remake or a sequel that's, you know what I mean? Like, there's something there for sure. And apparently, though, in the mid-2000s, 2000s, they were thinking about it, but not as like a regular game. It would have been a spin-off for the Nintendo DS and PlayStation Portable. So if we go all the way back to 2005 at E3, there was a playable build that was being shown off for the Nintendo DS of a game called Black and White Creatures. And while you think this would be a cool little spin-off that you can take on the go, it was not like a mainline game. Instead, it was more of like a pet sim rather than a god sim. So like, we're already missing a little bit. There was like a lot of different modes that were planned for it. There's gonna be like a multiplayer thing with like the creatures where you could battle them, which kind of sounds like something Pokemon would do. There was like some mini games planned, and you would use like the stylus and maybe even the microphone on the DS, which I forgot was a thing. Now, the DS version of the game is being developed by a studio called Full Fat, but it never ended up finishing, and it also never ended up getting canceled. All we know is that at E3, there was a build of the game that was like maybe 20% complete or so, and then in 2021, a early version of the game ended up leaking, and now people have access and we have footage of what this game would have looked like on the DS. More interestingly, though, later on, a PlayStation Portable build also surfaced, though the PlayStation Portable build does look less polished than the DS version. So either this build is from an older date or the PSP version was canceled and they were just going to do the DS version before the whole project fizzled out. But once again, we never had an official confirmation that it was canceled. All we had was the announcement way back in the day and then nothing ever again. Microsoft already owned the IP at that point, and back then, they seem to be a little bit picky on where their IPs showed up, especially if it was like the DS or the PlayStation Portable. It doesn't mean they were against working with other studios. I mean, we did see Banjo get a release on the Game Boy after the acquisition, and a couple other little things. Diddy Kong Racing, Rare got credit for that, and that was developed by Rare, even though it's a Nintendo IP. But I think Microsoft supported it. I don't think they like had an option. I think they just like passively endorsed it or something, even though they didn't. I think if it went to like a legal battle, it wouldn't have gone anywhere. I think Nintendo could have just done whatever they wanted. But you guys get what I mean. I think they allowed Rare to like email Nintendo back and forth about Diddy Kong Racing DS. That's just my headcanon. Don't write that down as like fact anywhere, please. That's it. Black and White was weird.
Around 2004, Climax Studios was working on a GameCube sequel for the N64 game Diddy Kong Racing. We just mentioned it, so I think it's a good point to talk about it, right? And this was going to be titled Diddy Kong Racing Adventure. They had ambitious plans for this game, like, you know, how the original one had the adventure mode, and they were going to expand on that, and now you're going to be able to drive to 16 villages, each with 3 courses, and they were like set across multiple islands. There's like design documents showing like the whole island.
Sounds cool. I loved Diddy Kong Racing as a kid. It was like a collectathon, but you raced. But like you could just like drive around and find the golden balloons in random places too. It was a big deal. Just trust me on it. I love Diddy Kong Racing more than Mario Kart. Sorry. Not sorry.
But yeah, they were going to expand on the whole feeling of the original. They would have brought back a lot of characters and also added some new ones. I think there was going to be 14 characters in total. And they were going to have vehicles like planes, jet skis, quad bikes, buggies, and hover scooters. Plus, they were planning on letting you customize the weather settings on the courses, which actually is pretty big. And they're going to also add a bunch of multiplayer modes and stuff like that. And the first time we ever saw this prototype was in 2016 when PTO Online posted a video showing off this prototype that, according to him, was used by Climax Studios as a pitch to Nintendo so they would fund the game. And then in 2020, those files leaked online. Now, mind you, at the time, they were developing this on Xbox hardware since it was easier to use the tools they were already using to, you know, make this, and then they would have shifted to GameCube, I guess. So in order to run it, you need to play it on an Xbox dev kit, which is kind of weird to see like a Nintendo game or Nintendo IP on an Xbox. Anyways, since we never got this game, you know, obviously whatever happened to the project fizzled out. We don't know many details. All we know is like what PTO Online said about it, and everything online is kind of based off that. The prototype is pretty bare bones, and it's just like one island, and I'm actually not surprised if Nintendo wouldn't have been impressed with this at the time, since like all you do is like get to ride around as Diddy Kong. Now, I said ride around, and that's the curious part. He's not in a vehicle, he's actually riding a rhinoceros. Or rhino?
Rambi. Huh? Rambi, do you not know your Donkey Kong lore? You don't know the characters? What are we doing here?
Bro, I still think Diddy Kong is his son. So
it's not his son, dude. It's his little buddy. It's in the lore.
It sounds worse. Anyway, so why is he not driving a vehicle?
Now, I have to wonder, because what year was this build from?
2004.
So this is after Rare's acquisition. And mind you, Rare worked on the original Diddy Kong Racing for the Nintendo 64. Then Rare was acquired in 2002 by Microsoft. But there was a project that Rare had been working on for a Diddy Kong Racing sequel called Donkey Kong Racing, I believe. And we've seen like a reveal trailer for it back in the day, and Rambi's in that too. So where does this new game come from randomly? I'm just starting to wonder if maybe somewhere along the lines after Rare had to drop out of Diddy Kong Racing's sequel, maybe Nintendo was shopping around for a new developer to pick up and make a sequel to the game because they didn't have Rare anymore. Rambi the Rhinoceros is still involved in this new iteration, but it then never came into fruition.
It is weird. Yeah, like it seems like more than a coincidence.
So I do know this. With the original project that Rare had been working on, they would try to rework it away from the Diddy Kong IP because obviously they weren't going to be able to have Nintendo's characters in a game like that. And I believe it was announced that they were going to take the character Saberman, which is like way back from Rare's back catalog, and make a full game called Saberman Stampede, a game we talked about, I think, in our other video, but that game went through a couple of iterations and then ultimately ended up getting canceled as well. So that game never turned into anything. It looks like there's like this fork now, like a Diddy Kong Racing sequel was planned, and when that fell apart, Saberman Stampede fell apart, and Diddy Kong Racing Adventure fell apart, maybe. Then there was Diddy Kong Pilot, right? And that was being worked on.
I mean, this kind of feeds into the Rare acquisition by Microsoft, right? Like before that, they were working on a DS game called Diddy Kong Pilot, and that was actually shown off in 2001 at Space World.
Game Boy game, you mean?
Yeah, what did I say?
DS.
Oh, sorry, a GameCube. Oh, okay, it was a GameCube Advance game, and they already
no. Game Boy Advance. You said GameCube Advance. Game Boy Advance.
Game Boy. Shit, dude.
GameCube Advance, bro.
Dude, actually, that'd be sick. Anyways, this was a Game Boy Advance game, and they showed this off at Space World around 2000 or 2001, and there's actually video of it, and you can see like Mario and stuff is still in the game, like somehow as a playable character in the game. I don't know.
Mario?
Yeah, Mario.
This is Diddy Kong Pilot?
Yeah, this is what they showed off at Space World 2000 or 2001.
Okay, I see Diddy, Peach, Mario, Cranky, Donkey Kong, probably Crunch, Yoshi, Wario, Bowser, Donkey Kong, Dixie Kong, and Toad. Where's all the Diddy Kong Racing characters?
I don't know, I'm very confused on this too. The first prototype that would leak for Diddy Kong Pilot from 2001 does not have this anymore, right? It already has like all the Donkey Kong characters in it. And I guess there's still leftover assets. What is this like picture?
Mario CDI or something.
Yeah, right? Like it looks like weird.
Yeah, that's pretty cursed. What's wrong with Bowser?
There's actually this too. Yeah, Mario on a plane? Was the original plan to have Mario characters in it?
It must have been. And look, Wario doesn't have his hat on.
No matter what. We have the 2001 version, right? That one is playable, and you can find that one online. And then there's also a 2003 version, right? Which would be after the acquisition of Microsoft, right? Because that was in 2002. And that one is quite a bit different again. And this time it's fully just like Diddy Kong themed. There's nothing left over from Mario or anything. Obviously, they couldn't keep using Diddy Kong, and even though they still worked on it, they eventually pivoted it to be a Banjo game, right? They took the 2003 build and then reworked it into a Banjo game for 2 years, and then we got Banjo Pilot, which is weird because, like, I don't know, why didn't they? I mean, I guess they were owned by Microsoft, but I don't know. I feel like they could have gotten the licensing agreements to do a Diddy Kong one, but oh well.
This is so confusing, the amount of canceled projects stemming from Diddy Kong Racing. Can we put a black screen on the screen? And let's just put these logos of what we got. So we got Diddy Kong Racing, and then they're like, we're gonna make a sequel, and the sequel was originally gonna be Donkey Kong Racing, but then there was spin-offs. So there was gonna be Diddy Kong Pilot, and that got scrapped and then made into, again, another Diddy Kong Pilot version. There's like a completely different build of that later. So we have that branch, and then that got turned into Banjo Pilot, which eventually did release. But then our Donkey Kong Racing game, right, the big one, the main sequel, that got canceled and then was turned into Saberman Stampede on one side, like on the left diagonal side, right? And then on the right diagonal side, perhaps Nintendo shopped around and Diddy Kong Racing Adventure was pitched, and that's what we have over on this side. And then neither of those came out, but then like down the middle, like further down the line, we have Diddy Kong Racing DS, which did release. You see how this is confusing.
Oh, you're missing any?
I think we are. Because in 2007, there was Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, which is a Donkey Kong racing game, right? I don't know if there's any connections other than it's a Donkey Kong racing game. It features some of the characters that were supposed to be in there. It has Diddy Kong, Donkey Kong, Dixie Kong, Tiny Kong, who was in the DS game, Linky Kong, who was supposed to be in Donkey Kong Racing. Okay, it doesn't look like at least there was any like specific connections where they're like, this is going to be the Donkey Kong Diddy Kong Racing game that we never got, you know what I mean? But this is crazy, right? Am I crazy?
No, dude, car races, I guess, used to be the hype, I guess, you know? Think about how many Crash Bandicoot races we've talked about in this video, too.
That's very true. But was there, I feel like there's like more Diddy Kong Racing stuff that we're missing though now. Like I'm paranoid that we're like forgetting some big ones because of how many there were.
I think with Barrel Blast, you already went deep. You know what I mean? Like that's I forgot that game existed, but it did exist. I don't remember it.
Also, why do they redesign Tiny Kong from Donkey Kong 64? Like, isn't this one kind of weird? Like, this isn't related to anything, but it's just like a side tangent. Like, Dixie Kong looks like this, right? Then in Donkey Kong 64, they're like, oh, this is going to be Dixie Kong's sister, Tiny Kong. And then she ages, but Dixie Kong doesn't age, and Tiny just randomly looks like this. Whose idea was it? Why? Why did this happen? Diddy Kong Racing DS is when they redesigned her character and she replaced Banjo from the game because obviously rare. And it's weird, like there's a cutscene at the beginning of Diddy Kong Racing where all the characters are running because they decided to add a story randomly for the remake. And it shows like Diddy and Dixie running alongside each other and then Tiny with her long creepy legs just running behind it. And then they just kept this design, Donkey Kong Barrel Blast, Mario Super Sluggers. She hasn't been a character in anything other than like these like occasional spin-offs, and she's the only one to get a redesign this severely different, and I just don't understand. Like someone was cooking that shouldn't have been cooking. They shouldn't have been led in the kitchen. Why are we doing this? I hate this. It's a racing game. They don't need to redesign the character. There's no purpose. She's in a vehicle. In Donkey Kong Racing, the trailer, she looked like this, and that was fine. They didn't have to do all this. This is extra.
Yeah, I thought it was like Diddy Kong's like childhood friend.
It's his girlfriend's sister. The whole family all has Kong in their last name, even if they're not related. Or they are related and they just don't care. I don't know.
Wait, Dixie Kong?
Have you not watched the 1 hour video on the entire family of Donkey Kong explained? It's a great video.
I've not, but
you don't know about Redneck Kong? I think he was supposed to be in Diddy Kong Pilot or something.
Oh, right. That was in the 2001 build for Diddy Kong Pilot.
This should be like my profile picture on Xbox. That's how I feel after trying to figure out all of the different Diddy Kong racing games.
Let's talk about E3 2010. Nintendo was trying to sell everybody on the idea of a 3DS. And as many of us know, the 3DS had a pretty hard time at launch for a few years before things could finally start to pick up some steam. But at E3 2010, Nintendo was trying to showcase all of the big games that were going to be coming out in the future. And there were a lot of different demos, footage, prototypes, and other things that were shown off, but none that were actually like able to be explored or looked at the files on, until randomly builds of this ended up leaking in just October of 2025, very recently. So for the first time in almost a decade, more than a decade, wait, how many years ago was 2010? Okay, so like the first time in 15 years, wow, we can take a closer look at some of the games that were featured in this special build from E3 2010 and see what was going on here. Now, YouTuber James Money actually has a really good video breaking down the Nintendo E3 2010 builds here, and there's some interesting things to note. Some of the games that are shown are essentially video demos that are just being rendered in the game engine, but aren't actually like playable builds of the game, though there is some level of interactivity, I guess. But then there's like straight up demos, and those are the ones that I think are the most interesting, like Starfox 64 3D. Right away, we get to take a closer look here, and while at E3 itself, they only showed off some gameplay from Corneria, the first level of the game. As it turns out, there was a little bit more here. The entire second level is playable in this demo build. Also, it's worth noting that this E3 build doesn't seem to run on emulation, so you have to have like old hardware to run this on, which makes the whole process of getting to access these things even harder. But yeah, I don't know. I find the Starfox thing really interesting. The main menu reuses assets from Star Fox Command, which is weird because Star Fox Command came out like in 2006, but they were using it, and they just like threw together a quick logo with the old Star Fox logo and 3D on it. And the gameplay doesn't have like sound or anything, you know, things that would be useful. There's no voice lines, but still, it's interesting to see a build that's this old. And there's other things that are worth noting, like the textures and designs look different between builds. Things did get polished up even more from this build to the actual launch of the game. Similarly, from this E3 build, there is Nintendogs plus Cats, and it's just like an early version of it, and that's cool and all, but as James Money showed in his video, in the game files, there is music, and if you look into the music, it's like a rendition of some Zelda music. So this is either like an asset that's pulled from The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time as it got a 3DS remake, or the 3DS game did have like themed rooms, so it was a Mario themed room. Maybe at one point there was plans for a Zelda themed room. That would have been pretty neat, right? There are early versions of other games like Pilot Wings for the 3DS here, or Pilot Wings Resort, I think was the name. And they had like a bunch of video demos because remember, the 3DS is going to let you watch movies in 3D because that's what people wanted to do on a handheld back then. I don't know. I mean, they were really trying to lean into the 3D technology because they thought it was the future and it wasn't the future. So, I mean, there's that. Hey, the 3DS at least let you turn off the feature. And then they did the whole 2DS later, which was a smart move because the 3D feature, I think, was really overrated. And then, yeah, at least we get to look at this stuff nowadays. In the same vein, another very recent build that ended up getting leaked was Tomb Raider 2013. But this Tomb Raider game has a build dating all the way back to 2011, and that is really interesting. Now, for the most part, from what we can see, it looks like a lot of the cutscenes are in a very, very, very early state, which I love these types of cutscenes to look at because, I mean, what am I looking at, right? Now, Protopia is the one that actually worked on getting this build released so people can experience it. And once again, he has a video on his channel which shows more in depth what this game is and what state it's in. And I gotta say, one of the big takeaways that myself and other people think is really cool is how the ponytail looks really good on Lara Croft. I don't know, like look at this thing go. And with this stuff being released like just a few days ago, also Protopia has noted that this is just one of many builds from this version of Tomb Raider that are going to be released soon. So I have a feeling that over the course of the next few weeks, we're actually going to see a lot of Tomb Raider stuff revealed, and we're going to get to see different versions and different stages of the game's development. It's cool that we get to hear these early voiceovers before the real voice talent was brought in, but like look at this. This is so neat.
Hello, is anyone there? Can anyone hear me? Hello?
Sam!
Lara! Lara! Oh my god, you beautiful British nutcase.
When I saw him take you, I thought that
I die 1,000 miles from the nearest department store. I know.
Shit! Oh my god, Laura. I have to go. Someone's coming. I've got to hide this thing.
I don't know. Am I the only one who gets excited when things like this happen? Even for games that are... How old is Tomb Raider at this point? It's 2026 now? Like 13 years old? That's weird.
All the way back in the day, in the Xbox 360 and PS3 era, there was actually a leaked prototype of Gears of War 3 running on the PS3. And I don't think it got much attention back then, but that's actually such a crazy thing. Because back then, Xbox exclusives were actually so good, people would buy an Xbox 360. Something that is like unimaginable today. Like, who's going out and buying an Xbox to play Avowed? But the point is, seeing a PS3 version of Gears of War 3 is just crazy. And there were two different prototypes from January and May of 2011, which was probably later during the development of Gears of War 3, but it was still before the release in September of 2011. With there being a build in January and a build in May, it does let us speculate that they did put a couple months into this PS3 port. What is even more interesting though is that these prototypes technically leaked before Gears of War 3 even released. There was like a big leak in July 2011 and like a bunch of Gears of War 3 stuff leaked, like I think the full game or almost the full game. And these prototypes for the PS3 were in there and nobody figured out how to get them to run on emulation until 2021 when data archivist Pixelbuds was able to figure out a way to get the May 2011 build to run and posted about it online. And now people had access to it and they were able to record footage and play this prototype for the very first time. The full game is almost completely playable. There is 2 levels that don't work and one of them is the finale, so I guess you can't technically beat the game, but you know, you can play most of it. It does struggle to run and the performance is really bad, plus there's a lot of technical issues that could make the game crash at any point. And when Pixelbuds posted about this, you know, and released this to the public and people started talking about it, Epic actually released a statement to Kotaku clarifying that this was just a test for Unreal 3 and not something that was ever meant to release. I mean, it does make sense because like there's no way that in 2011 Xbox would have let this happen and would have put a game on PS3 at the height of the Xbox 360 era. And according to Epic, this was more something like they would just show to people who were interested in working with the Unreal 3 engine as like one of the capabilities of the Unreal Engine. So it wasn't something that was supposed to be released for retail. Still, what a time to be alive to see the prototype for Gears of War 3 on the PS3.
Okay, you know how like a few years ago, 6 Days in Fallujah finally came out in early access?
Yes, and we still need to play it.
Yeah, we still haven't gotten around to playing it. But as many of you know, if you've known about this game, it was in development hell for a long time. It was pretty controversial because it like depicts what, 2004 Iraq invasion or something, right? It was the second battle of Fallujah during the Iraq War in 2004. Look at me knowing my history.
Oh, you said 2006?
I definitely said 2004, right?
Play the tape.
Play the tape. Luke's going crazy.
Because it like depicts what, 2004?
Okay, now you have to record a reaction if it's you going crazy, and then I'll record my reaction of me going crazy.
Okay. Damn, I guess I'm going crazy.
Darn. I know I'm right, honestly. There's no way I'm wrong. Nonetheless, the game was in development. It was controversial because of like the setting and the depiction. And I think that caused the publisher of the game to kind of get like cold feet. So they wanted to leave the project, and the game like started running out of money, even though it was mostly finished. And then it was kind of like canceled quietly. But then at the same time, there were still plans to try to get the game released. And then later development was just like restarted by a whole nother studio. I think it was Highwire Games. I had a bunch of employees from Bungie who worked on like Halo and Destiny. And then eventually 2023, right? The game came out into early access. But the old version of the game is like almost lost media. And while there was some gameplay that was shown off back in the day, because the game was really far along, we didn't get much. And while there isn't a playable build of that version of the game floating around out there yet, like online, I'm pretty sure there's a playable build floating out there somewhere, and hopefully at some point it gets dumped. However, there is footage of the game that has been slowly revealed over time from former developers who just wanted to show off this game that they put like a lot of time and work into. Periodically, over the years after the game was canceled, things have surfaced. Like in 2017, there was like 4 minutes of pre-alpha footage dated all the way back to 2008 that one of the developers posted. Some other developers who worked on it posted some developmental footage showing off like different animations and things that were constructed for the game. So there's stuff out there, and it's really interesting to see like these different little demos. The search for a full playable build of the game is still on, and I really do hope this is one that gets uncovered, because like this is really, really fascinating. I mean, the game was like set like months from release before everything fell apart. Developers were laid off probably before the game was fully finished, and it was a very small team trying to finish and polish it up. But I think for the most part, like surely 80 to 90% of the game was done. It is a shame, I think, that we haven't gotten to see at least this surface online so people can check it out and see what it was like, and just have the preservation of like years of hard work that like over 100 people worked on. I think that's really interesting.
Okay, Elijah, why do you think the Duke Nukem IP is dead?
Because it took way too long to finally release the follow-up game, and then it was kind of received mid, and then like why risk that again? I don't know.
The follow-up game you're talking about is Duke Nukem Forever, right? Mm-hmm. And they released in 2011, but did you know they released a even worse rated Duke Nukem game the same year? And that is Duke Nukem Critical Mass for the Nintendo DS.
They did a Duke Nukem game on the DS? Oh, how do I not know about that? That's so weird.
The game was really badly rated. It was just bad. It was just a bad game. And I would say it's even a lower point than, Duke Nukem Forever. It is because it's like a 2D side-scrolling thing. You know how those DS games go. And I hate when 3D franchises do that. They always suck. Like the DS versions of so many games just sucked straight up. And they announced this originally in 2008 for DS and PSP, with the PSP version being a third-person shooter. So they're going to make 2 versions. And this was going to kick off a trilogy of handheld games, with Critical Mass being the first one, and then Duke Nukem Chain Reaction and Duke Nukem Proving Grounds being the sequels. And each of them had different settings. Like the first one was in the future, the second one was going to be present day, and the third one was going to be in World War II, which actually sounds kind of wild. Both the DS and PSP versions of the first game, Critical Mass, were slated for 2009 release, with the sequel supposed to come out 2010 and 2011. But then, at the end, we only got a DS game in 2011, so what happened? What actually happened behind the scenes is there was a lot of confusion about who owned the IP between 2010 and 2011, and it kind of led to them messing up the build for the PSP game. So in 2008, publisher Apogee licensed the rights for Duke Nukem back when 3D Realms themselves was still working on Duke Nukem Forever at the time. I mean, I think the game was already in development hell for like a while back then. And when 3D Realms ran out of money in 2009, they laid off the entire Duke Nukem Forever development team, and then got sued by the publisher Take-Two, and then like this legal battle ensued, and that legal battle caused a lot of confusion at Apogee on whether or not they are now allowed to make this Duke Nukem game that they had licensed from 3D Realms. So they delayed both versions for the DS and PSP, and by late 2010 they decided to pivot the PSP version into a standalone game that would have been called Extraction Point Alien Shootout, so they could maybe still get it out, and they just like replaced the model of Duke Nukem with like this random generic character and made up a new alien type IP. I don't know. When then Randy Pitchford and Gearbox stepped in and picked up the Duke Nukem IP, right? And then they finished Duke Nukem Forever, and that's the game we got. They would allow Apogee to still publish the game with the licensing contract signed with 3D Realms. But since they pivoted the PSP version, they fucked up the code so hard they couldn't just go back in time before the licensing contract would run out. So like they basically had to publish what they had in 2011. Plus also I think UMDs are way more expensive to way more expensive to produce than Nintendo DS cartridges, so I guess it would have also costed more. The PSP version was cancelled, the DS version we got, and it was rated badly. But in 2014, the source code for the PSP version of Duke Nukem Critical Mass before they pivoted was found in the Library of Congress of all places.
Why?
Someone found a DVD-ROM that had the source code on it, since I guess they submitted it for copyright registration at some point, and I guess it was never taken back. I don't know. So some guy found it that worked there. And obviously the Library of Congress isn't gonna leak the source code, but eventually, like, builds would leak. And in 2022, we finally got a ton of different builds from the year 2010, actually, including prototypes for the PSP version of Critical Mass, but also prototypes for when they pivoted into this Extraction Point alien shootout game. So we kind of can look at both versions, and most of them are playable pretty easily, but they're really janky, and like the controls are bad, the performance is bad, it doesn't run well. I can see why they couldn't just pivot this. This probably needed another year or two, and they just didn't have the time. It still looks better than the DS version, but like it still would have been worse than Duke Nukem Forever, which already is not a great game either. They probably did good deciding to cut their losses with this one, because I think this would have just been shit on as well. While 2011 was a rough year for Duke Nukem, it wasn't always like that. Like in the late 90s and early 2000s, there were regular Duke Nukem games, like for example Duke Nukem Time to Kill for the PS1. And recently, a PS2 prototype dated 2001 for a cancelled game called Duke Nukem D-Day leaked. This was a World War II time travel game where Duke Nukem gets transported back into the 1940s. And it actually contains 12 playable levels that are kind of rough and like still need a lot of polish, but like they had their structure laid out with this one.
Wait, this sounds like an awesome premise.
It is.
This is actually a thing that was greenlit?
Yes, it was greenlit, yeah, and they're working on it from 1999 to 2003, so this had 4 years of development. So the build that we got is only from 2001, so it's only 2 years into development, right? There's no cutscenes, no nothing, but we do know that this would have started off in a strip club, then the aliens invade, then somehow Duke Nukem lands in World War II, and then there's levels in like a castle, a village, Antarctica. There's even like a boat level where you drive a boat and you shoot down planes and stuff. And yes, also you get to experience D-Day as Duke Nukem, which is pretty crazy. And I think like at the end you would have invaded a secret facility in Antarctica and taken out the aliens. Since the cutscenes are missing, there's not a lot of context. And crazy enough, this was going to be published by Rockstar, who had just released GTA 3 around this time. And it was going to be developed by Nspace, who already made other Duke Nukem games for the PlayStation before, and they were decently successful. 3D Realms was still involved though, since they were going to co-publish it as well, right? And obviously they own the IP. So I think Rockstar was going to cover the marketing costs and stuff, and then 3D Realms was going to cover development costs, which will be relevant later.
Oh, okay, wait. So now I'm confused by this. So was this after they were working on Duke Nukem Forever already?
Oh, this is a different company making a PS2 game.
Like a spin-off then altogether.
Yeah, like a spin-off. I don't know. Duke Nukem just got PlayStation games back in the day that were not made by 3D Realms. I don't know.
It just sounds so like such a good idea, but I can assume it fell apart because of the fact that like they never did Duke Nukem Forever, which was like what they were supposed to be working on. Like the publisher was supposed to be working on?
Yes, kind of. As I said, development lasted from 1999 to 2003, and then it was cancelled. And the official statement from 3D Realms was there was lack of sufficient progress. But I don't know if that's true. That's just like a very generic statement, and even this 2001 build has some potential to it. I think there's two things that happened behind the scenes. Firstly, Nspace had issues with the new PS2 hardware and the Unreal Engine, and that delayed the development, so they needed longer. And then 2003 came around, and 3D Realms was already struggling financially since they had been working on Duke Nukem Forever at this point already for a long time. And since they were the ones funding development at Nspace, they just canceled it. Now there's a big gap between the year of the prototype 2001 and the cancellation in 2003. So it would be interesting to see what they did get done in those 2 years, and if there's ever like a version of that gets released. We don't know how far they got along in those 2 years, but we do get to see this prototype, which is pretty crazy actually, and the premise is pretty cool. I wish they would have done this and this would have come out. Like, I feel like this prototype itself is already better than Duke Nukem Forever in 2011.
I mean, some people like Duke Nukem Forever looking back now. It's one of those things where back at the time, a game with that long of development, you have this super high expectation, and then when it's like fine and not amazing, you get let down. It's the same thing that's going to end up happening with Elder Scrolls 6 probably.
Yeah, but I'm not excited for Elder Scrolls 6.
Well, I mean, it's still, what, 10 years away?
Yeah, I guess I have time to get excited.
I don't think it's going to happen with GTA 6, but I do believe we're going to have a surprising number of, like, cynical people hating on GTA 6 when it launches, no matter what.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact it's popular. It's just the state of like the gaming community now. It's pretty toxic. So I feel like that's kind of what happened with Duke Nukem Forever.
But it did kill the franchise.
I mean, yeah, it kind of did. So what can we say? Okay, Luke, I have one question for you. And this ends up being connected to a game that pretty much I think counts for this video, but we can argue it later. What's your favorite animated movie from like the window of, say, 2002 to 2012?
I don't know. Probably like, I don't know. Tarzan came out in the 90s. What came out in 2012?
The only animated movie you can think of is Tarzan.
And Up, but I think that came out later.
It was 2009.
Oh, wait, okay, then let's say Up. Okay, there we go.
We'll look it up. Get it? No pun intended.
Ooh, dude.
Honestly, I was low-key expecting you to say the movie Food Fight from 2012. Have you ever seen that movie?
I mean, I've seen a video on it, so I kind of know about it.
Okay, so you know the lore of it a little bit. Now, for everyone else who's uneducated swine and don't know to appreciate Food Fight 2012, this was an animated movie that took place in a supermarket and featured mascot characters from popular food brands. But honestly, like, are these characters even popular? Like, I don't know. So this movie originally was conceived in 1997. They raised like tens of millions of dollars. Essentially, they were able to reach a $50 million budget for a film project with this premise. And the movie was originally supposed to release in 2003, except there were a ton of delays, so the movie was delayed to 2005, then 2007, and then finally in 2012, the movie came out somehow. There's a lot of reasons why this movie was delayed. Allegedly in 2002, the guy in charge of the film, Lawrence Kasanoff, claimed that the hard drive that had most of the assets was stolen, and it was a part of like an industrial espionage type thing, like some big conspiracy to stop this movie or slow the process down. Because of course it couldn't have been like bad management or anything like that, right?
Do you think it was just too embarrassed to release it? He just made it up?
Dude, but they still released it, so I don't know. And with a movie like this, they had to line up a ton of licensing deals with different companies that would appear in the movie. But then with all of the delays, some of these companies ended up retracting their license that were given or chose not to renew the license for the movie. A lot of the movie had to be reworked. This movie was in limbo, and finally the production company working on the film ended up running out of money. And I think they filed for bankruptcy, which then meant that all the progress had been made to whatever was existing left of the film that had been done, and like any other assets were auctioned off. And essentially a company called Fireman's Fund Insurance Company purchased the rights, and they funded the film to be completed as cheaply and as quickly as possible. And within a year of this auction happening in 2011, the movie saw a limited release in 2012, like 10 years pretty much since the movie was supposed to release. It didn't get a normal theatrical run either. I think it was mostly just direct to video. The movie's not good, right? Like, I mean, I think we all could assume that. But what I think is interesting is that the voice cast, they had Charlie Sheen, Hilary Duff, and a few others, they recorded their voice lines like years and years earlier. And then finally in 2012, this thing happens. Like, Hilary Duff back then was like a Disney star. 2012 didn't have Hilary Duff as a Disney star anymore. Now, this might make you wonder, all right, cool history lesson, Elijah. What does it have to do with this video? There was a game that was in production for a while for the PlayStation 2.
Oh.
Did you know about that, Luke?
No, I did not know.
In the early 2000s, as many of us know, video game movie tie-ins were everywhere. Any movie could get a tie-in. And if it was an animated movie, especially So there was a tie-in game planned for the PlayStation 2, and this game is being developed at a studio called Cat Daddy Studios, which is a crazy name for a studio, but it was a studio that was owned by 2K, so it's like, you know, a reputable studio too. I wonder what Cat Daddy Games made, like besides the canceled Food Fight. Are they still around? Is this the same Cat Daddy Games? Why did they only have their like 3 games on there? And they're like recent games. Man, I can't find much about Cat Daddy Games. It says that they might be like a mobile 2K studio and they had layoffs in the summer. I wonder what games they made though back in like the 2000s.
Let's see. Wait, oh, they did those carnival games on the Wii. I do remember those actually.
Well, they were going to have their big breakthrough with the Food Fight video game, I'm sure. There was a lot of issues why the game got canceled, just like internal difficulties from like a game production side, but I don't think it can help if there's like a window when the game needs to be done for the movie and then the movie keeps changing up what it's doing. They probably weren't banking too much of a profit on this game anyways. They're probably just like, let's just cut our losses and not have this. However, years later, in 2024, one of the developers, Harley Howe, actually decided to just like open up in a blog post and talk about the game development. In that blog post, he included gameplay footage for Food Fight. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's any builds of this game still around or available. I don't think this will be something that'll ever become playable. And while the PS2 was what the game likely was mainly being focused on, it was also set up to release on the Wii, Xbox, and maybe another version for the DS. I don't know if they already had a team ready to go on that or how that works, because I'm sure the DS was like a different build of the game altogether, but you know, we don't get that much information nowadays. Fortunately enough, though, Harley Howe did provide nearly 10 gigabytes of material that was from the game's development. Look at this. We can now see a little bit of the game and see what they were working on, I guess. And I mean, that's cool. I don't think it's like the #1 most sought after game that people are really wanting to see, you know, shown, I guess. I don't know, Luke, is this like your #1 thing you've always wanted to see?
Honestly, looking at this, it looks better than the movie. Like,
it kind of does, I'll be honest. Like, more ambitious. But probably at this time there was no movie, so like they probably just had to make stuff up as they went.
I want to say this, it looks way too good to be paired with that movie. I think they canceled it because it would have outshined the movie, you know?
Yeah, that had to have been it. I wonder how much of like the work that was done there like ended up like not necessarily directly being used in a different game, but like concepts. Like surely like some of the gameplay got reused in like a mini game somewhere in like a Carnival games or something, right? Like, I don't know. If you played a bunch of Carnival games for the Wii and they re-released on the Switch, is there like a fan base for Carnival games? The game didn't score well. It has like a 48 out of 100 on Metacritic.
I'm pretty sure there's like tens of different versions.
There's Carnival Games Mini Golf, new Carnival Games Monkey See, Monkey Do, which is the Xbox 360 version that came out in 2011, Carnival Games Wild West 3D, which is the 3DS version, and they did 2 VR only games, and then a remake of Carnival Games to the Carnival Games cinematic universe, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know, this is Cat Daddy's big franchise.
I guess so, they're bread and butter. Do you know there's a Rockstar India?
No, what did they make?
It's just like in the like 2K companies list. I don't know, they worked on Red Dead 2, that's all. We don't know really. I mean, I'm sure they are doing some sort of work on GTA. They acquired the largest or the oldest game developer in India for 7.9 million too, after they already founded the company.
Interesting.
And they took the 300-person team and integrated them into Rockstar India. So now they have like 800 employees as of 2019.
God damn.
What else does Rockstar have? They got a Toronto, Lincoln, England. Okay. They also used to have Rockstar Vancouver and Rockstar Vienna. And each company has their own color. That's kind of cool for their R. They like color code them.
The main one is in Edinburgh, right? Like Scotland. Rockstar North. It's the OG one.
Yeah, that one is, yeah. Is that the original one?
I thought so.
I always think of the orange logo, but I guess maybe the orange logo is like the overall company logo. Rockstar Lincoln is like dangerously close to like infringing on that with their color choice.
That might just because you're colorblind.
Why does it not look orange also to you?
No, it looks like a green.
Here's the good thing. If this does make it into the video, a bunch of people who are watching this video who didn't know they were colorblind are going to find out that they're colorblind. And then they're going to go take those like little dot tests and then realize.
I mean, design like a colorblind test with the Rockstar logo.
If you can't see this on your screen, you might be colorblind or a level of colorblind. Technically, it's called color deficiency. Colorblind's when you can't see any colors. You'll learn about it over time. It's okay.
I don't know why color deficiency sounds worse somehow. Like, sounds like you get something wrong with you.
I mean, it makes sense though. Colorblind technically doesn't sound like the right term.
Sure.
Color deficient does sound like you have like a vitamin deficiency.
Yeah,
like
or
you can't see colors because you didn't take those fucking gummy vitamins.
No
Flintstone vitamins, dude. Like you lost the color, dude.
There's so many forgotten publishers from the 90s. Like, I don't know, we could probably make a whole video, 3-hour video on just forgotten publishers from the 90s that are not around anymore. And one of them is GameTag. Not sure what they're best known for, but if I had to guess, it would probably be a Family Feud game for the NES. I don't know, they don't really have an impressive catalog. The point is, they didn't make any memorable games, and it doesn't really matter for the story actually, but I just wanted to say that's the publisher of this next game. And in the early 90s, they hired a studio called Manley and Associates, which then was renamed to EA Seattle and then eventually closed down and merged with EA Vancouver or EA Canada to make a Tarzan game for release in 1994. And this game leaked in 2019. It's a pretty standard SNES platformer from the time. Like, I don't know, it looks like any other platformer on the SNES. I don't know. They all look the same to me. Maybe I'm a platformer blind or something like that.
Platformer deficient.
Oh, platformer deficient, my bad. But in 1994, it was canceled. And it was not because money ran out or there was management issues or they didn't think the game was going to be good. it was canceled because it was too violent for kids. Let me send you this GIF that's like, you know, like the animation files, you know, because like games used to have those. And like you tell me if this is maybe a little overkill.
I mean, it's not that bad, but it is a little bit. I mean, it's nothing, but kind of silly. They could have added some like Mortal Kombat level of blood and this game would be fire.
Honestly, it would have been, but I guess they didn't want to. And I mean, this wasn't Disney's Tarzan. So this was more accurate to the original books, right? Like those were more brutal than like the Disney version. So, I mean, they're not totally out of line here. At least the developer was, but I guess the publisher thought this was too far. I don't know. I just think it's funny looking back at this, like with the Tarzan we grew up with, like the Disney fight one, and then seeing like him like grab a gorilla and stab him in the chest. Nothing they would do in the movie.
He was raised by those gorillas too, and then he's stabbing them in the chest. Okay, Luke, I have a question for you. We're gonna be on a choose your own adventure for the next part of this video. But you're going to be choosing our own adventure.
Oh, dude, this is exciting. It's like a game.
Do you want to do recent? Like you want to look at a game that had a build leaked in 2025? Or do you want to go all the way back in time where we have a build of a game that was leaked onto the internet in 1995?
Let's do 1995.
We're talking about Sonic Crackers.
Oh, whoa, what'd you just call me?
Do we get in trouble for that? Is there like a rule on YouTube? Okay, so this one's really interesting. If you're big on Sonic, you've probably known about this one forever because the fact that it was dumped years ago. Sonic Crackers essentially was just a prototype that was being developed originally on the Sega Mega Drive before development would shift into Sega's 32X system, which was like a whole weird attachment for your Mega Drive. I don't know why this existed. The Mega Drive's the Genesis, right? I don't know why Sega had multiple names for everything back then. It was like this attachment, you snap it in and then you got 32-bit graphics. Sonic Crackers, though, was a build that was being constructed still on the Genesis, and it was implementing this like two-character controlling aspect, which was kind of interesting for a Sonic game. And this idea would evolve and it wouldn't become a canceled game. It would just pivot and it turned into the more obscure Sonic game, Knuckles Chaotix, which is not even a Sonic game, but it introduced Team Chaotix. It had like Mighty the Armadillo, who became forgotten, then later was like slightly remembered. That's cool. But the original Sonic Crackers, I'm pretty sure you can actually get a build running and play through some of it yourself. And it just has like Sonic and Tails as like the characters you play as. And there's like the ring connecting them already all the way back then, and then more builds of the game would slowly release over time. There's like 10 different builds of this game that you can actually access online right now, but this build dating all the way back to 1994 is the only one available on the Sega Mega Drive. Everything else was moved over to the 32X by later builds of the game, so you can kind of play the game in its developmental stages, I guess, if you really wanted to. There are a lot of interesting things though from this build, a lot of unused things if you ever are really interested in like specifics. The cutting room floor, of course, always a great asset or like showing off different things like that. I do want to point out though, if you look at the ROM header, it's actually listed as Sonic Stadium, not Sonic Crackers, but the main menu screen looks like this. So I don't know what we're supposed to call it. And if you're just wondering about why they referred to a prototype as Sonic Crackers, it's likely just like a translation issue. It probably was supposed to be titled Sonic Clackers because like the sound was like little clacker toys make. That's the way that like the characters interact with each other with the little connection. But in Japan, they don't have a letter for L. So a lot of the times when they're pronouncing foreign words that have an L in it, they use an R as a placeholder. So instead of Sonic Clackers, we got Sonic Crackers. And then everybody got to experience some of that.
Dude, this would have made a great like Ritz Crackers crossover.
Dude, they could have done a good Ritz crossover, like a Ritz World Zone or something like that.
Yeah. I can envision it right now.
Or Wheat Thins if Ritz didn't want in.
Nah, things. You said I can choose my own adventure, right? So what's the next path?
Well, technically you have to beat the campaign first before you get to do a playthrough, and then you get to choose the other path. But if you really want to, I guess we can go back.
Let's just imagine this is like New Game Plus or something, you know what I mean? Like,
okay. So instead we can look at a build of a different game, a beloved game from the mid-2000s that only had this specific prototype build leaked in April of 2025, making a very recent leak. Good old-fashioned Star Wars Battlefront, a really good one from back in the day. Now, there have been other builds of Star Wars Battlefront that have leaked over time. The thing that's really interesting is that this new build is actually a prototype build going all the way back to July 23rd, 2003, over a year before the game would launch. Builds of games that you can access that are over a year before its release date are some of the most interesting things. If you look at Call of Duty 4 or Call of Duty World at War, or just like any of the old Halo prototypes, it's so fascinating to see cut content, how things have changed, what things they were playing around with. Now, there's already a lot of YouTubers YouTubers who've done deep dives into this, and it is cool to see some of the big major differences. You could tell early on that they were definitely trying out some different things. There's Acclimator ship, which is kind of the big thing that a lot of people talk about, is actually flyable. And in general, during this build, flying vehicles just seemed like a lot rougher around the edges. Like they were still trying to figure out how that was going to work. It's really cool to see this step and stage in development. And at the same time, it's interesting to take a look at some of the maps in the older builds of Star Wars Battlefront anyways, because they are quite a bit different, or in some cases completely different. Nonetheless, it's an interesting time, especially if you liked the Star Wars Battlefront games back in their mid-2000s.
You know, you could do your own adventure too if you want to.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay, so you can pick between a game that was a 360 game until it became an Xbox One launch title, or a game that never released on PS3 but was prototyped on PS3.
Let's start with the PS3 one, and then I am curious about that other one too.
Okay. So, in 2019, a PS3 dev kit was found with Need for Speed prototypes. And mainly, there was a lot of prototypes for Most Wanted and Need for Speed Rivals on it, which were the 2012-2013 releases for Need for Speed, respectively. There was one prototype of Rivals dated April 2nd, 2014, which was months after the retail release, so either it must have been cancelled DLC or something else. Well, it was identified as being something codenamed Genesis, which as it turns out is the codename for the 2015 Need for Speed reboot for PS4 and Xbox One. So this build was like one of the earliest, if not the earliest builds of the Need for Speed reboot, and it was still based in Need for Speed Rivals. And they had just wrapped up DLC for Rivals the month prior, so it makes sense that they would have started prototyping for the next game around that time. And at the time this leaked, it wasn't playable and nobody really knew what it actually looked like until YouTuber Brawltendo was able to get it working in 2024 and posted about it online. And he actually has a detailed guide on how to get this running, and I actually went through the steps and I played it myself, and it's just very buggy and very unfinished. In the prototype build, there's 2 test maps that were very early, like lockout phases of maps. The HUD is the same as Rivals, but you can see they were testing stuff like drifting and handling already. Most interestingly though is that they were already switching the setting to California during this, because they already have a map called Santa Monica and there's like the beach and stuff, while Need for Speed Rivals I think was based on Colorado, so I don't think there would have been a beach and the ocean in Colorado. As far as I'm aware, there's none. So basically, this is a version for a game that never released for PS3 since, you know, next gen was out, but they still prototyped it on PS3 in 2014, which is also kind of weird. Maybe they were still planning on having PS3 version, but then eventually scrapped that. The other one is actually a little Xbox One launch title called Rise, Son of Rome. You remember how that was like the biggest launch title the Xbox One had in 2013?
Oh, yeah, my roommate in college bought it, and I didn't play it. I watched him play a little bit of it. It's super exciting, right? Like, it's almost like I played it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you didn't miss out on much. It's kind of bad.
It was short, right? He played it for like a day and then never played it again.
It is very short, and it is like kind of boring, and it's definitely not a oh, I gotta buy an Xbox One on launch day type of game.
There was no game like that on launch day.
It's just a weird game, like very mediocre. And this game was developed by Crytek, specifically their Budapest studio at first. And ideas and pitches to publishers for this game started all the way back in 2006. That was like a year into the 360 era, and Microsoft picked it up around 2009. And eventually it was first shown off as codename Kingdoms at E3 2010, and in 2011 it was renamed to just Rise, and now it's gonna be a Kinect only game. So no controller, just a Kinect game. And with that name change, they shifted from a fantasy setting into creating ancient Rome. And somewhere around this time they also switched from the Crackdown engine to the Cry engine, and the project was also moved over to a different Crytek studio, the one in Frankfurt. So there was just like a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. And eventually the team developing this was kind of like, damn, the Kinect sucks and players are gonna hate this, because they struggled to make it fun. They had to make a Kinect game and they were like, ah, damn, this kind of sucks. So they ended up prototyping 3 separate versions of this game. One that was fully playable with the Kinect, another one that was a hybrid between Kinect and Xbox 360 controller, and then one more that was just playable with the 360 controller. And Microsoft eventually went for the second option, and Phil Spencer would personally announce that now Kinect would just be part of the game. It wouldn't be a Kinect only game. But now they're changing the style once again, which would mean major delays, since much of the early work was tied to the Kinect only version. And I mean, the project was already behind already with like engine changes, studio changes. And since it was already 2012 by that time, it was now moved to be an Xbox One launch title and announced as such at E3 2013. And that's when we saw the final reveal for Rise, Son of Rome. The Kinect gameplay for this version was like very minor. Like you would like shout things at your squad or give some commands to your squad.
You can also use voice commands. So for the parts during the demo, maybe you saw where they had a little caption on the bottom of the screen that said like, capture that catapult or take that catapult or something with like a left bumper button. You can either just press the left bumper if you want. You can also physically yell out what is being said on the screen if you want. Or you can actually, in certain contextual situations, make a motion that sort of implies what you want to do.
It wasn't a Kinect game at all, right? It's like how Halo CE Anniversary had like Kinect integration. You could be like, throw a grenade, and then it would throw a grenade. It was just like useless.
I remember that one. You're like, grenade! And then like a second later, Master Chief throws the grenade.
Weirdly enough, the decision to make this a launch title was not made by Microsoft. It was Crytek's decision, since they really, really wanted to be part of Xbox One's launch, which they believed was going to be like a big thing. But in hindsight, it's probably the worst console launch of the modern era. Yeah, like probably, yeah. Nonetheless, a bunch of builds ended up leaking, dated from 2010, 2012. So it was during this like time where they were changing up a lot of stuff. And the 2012 builds were shortly before the decision was made to switch over to Xbox One. So all these prototype builds are still Xbox 360 games. And a lot of these builds are super buggy and textures are missing, but you can still go and play multiple versions of Rise Son of Rome for the 360. Even the original version that was called Codename Kingdoms. Kind of interesting, I guess. It's probably more interesting than the game itself. I'm not gonna lie.
Hey, it's something though. It adds more depth.
When are they gonna make a sequel?
I don't feel like that's gonna happen.
Damn.
Okay, this next one's a quick one, but still a really interesting one that I think's worth talking about. But do you guys remember the original Crackdown game? The game released all the way back in 2007. Microsoft pulled some little strings here, you know, a little bait and switch type thing. I mean, not really, but back in the day, Halo 3 was probably one of the most anticipated video games of all time. And if you wanted to play the beta for Halo 3, all you had to do is pick up a copy of this other game called Crackdown, and you could get access to the beta for Halo 3. The game sold really well. It got 1.5 million copies in the first 6 months, which doesn't necessarily mean it was all because of Halo, but it definitely helped, I think. And essentially the game was praised because it was this third-person shooter game that had this like open world sandbox type aspect. I don't know if it classifies as open world, but you get the idea of the sandbox aspect of Crackdown. You guys know what I'm talking about here, even if it doesn't make sense. I'm sorry. But this game was originally inspired to be like an expansion of the idea of Grand Theft Auto, giving players just a big open sandbox to literally play in, like a city, but go all out and not have to be necessarily based in like regular real day-to-day realism. But the thing about Crackdown's development is that it actually was pretty lengthy. Development actually started all the way back in 2002, originally supposed to release in 2005, but when a demo rolled around 2004, the game was still pretty far off. So Microsoft brought the team over to the Xbox 360 hardware and wanted to, you know, move the game over for maybe a 2006 release. And then they switched to engines, and then that was apparently a big mistake. So then the game would get delayed again. So with the game finally releasing in 2007, you can't help but to wonder, a game with a lengthy development like this, what were some of the snapshots of what the game looked like earlier on in development? Now, over the years, there have been some builds that have leaked online, quite a few actually, but the one that I think is the most notable one is the March 2006 build, when the game was still about a year off from releasing. And this build, while it looks like, you know, a pretty far along development build, despite all of the issues that it had, but it's still an early version of the game. Aesthetically speaking, it is a night and day different from what we saw at launch. I mean, look at these things side by side, but also there's a lot of like differences in this version of the game compared to what the actual game would have. A lot of layout differences are different, and there's still like, you know, not a lot of the aspects of the world that you would engage in. Now, it is a build of the game, and there are videos of people showing themselves playing the game, but nonetheless, I just think it's really cool that we can see this really old version of Crackdown, a game that was originally going to be on the original Xbox once upon a time, and then was moved to the 360, and then was delayed, and then nobody really cared, and then they bundled Halo 3 in it, and then all of a sudden people are like, so what's this Crackdown game about actually? Because if I get to play Halo 3's beta for 3 whole weeks if I buy it, well, maybe I'll buy it. And I think that actually worked really well. They should have done that with Crackdown 3, I feel like. Actually, no, because then what would they put it with? Halo Infinite beta?
Okay, when I bring up the video game series Prey, there's one of two games you will probably think about depending on how fly you are. Either you will think of the Prey 2017 reboot or the original 2006 Prey. Prey, which was definitely the better Prey. Nonetheless, whichever you thought of, nobody here thought of the original 1995 Prey, which at the time was in development at 3D Realms. And I mean, it makes sense that you don't think of this one because it never actually launched. But a prototype version that was in development for roughly 5 months, starting in July 1995, and the actual prototype being dated November 1995, was leaked. And it's actually playable. And this prototype is more of a tech demo because they were developing a brand new 3D engine for this, since 3D Realms had a lot of hope for this project. And there was ambitious idea they were going to implement, like portals and destructible environments, though this prototype doesn't have any of that yet. But they took this and showed it to the publisher GT Interactive to secure funding. And I guess this, paired together with like the ambitious idea like the portals and the destructible environments, GT Interactive was like, hell yeah! And they gave them a $900,000 deal for development and publishing in May of 1996. So this demo specifically is the one that secured that funding, since it did seem like something that had potential, especially for the mid-90s. During this time, Prey was being led by Tom Hall, who's one of the founders of id Software and had parts in designing Doom and Wolfenstein before he ended up at 3D Realms. And as the team is working on this game, they're kind of like stuck between having to make an engine, you know, like from scratch, and then find the direction for the game. And they had a lot of technical issues since it was a new engine, and it was just kind of like frustrating to work, and it didn't really feel like you were making like a game. It just felt like you were constantly trying to fix technical issues. And a lot of people were kind of fed up and ended up leaving the studio, including Tom Hall, who left in August of 1996 to form a new studio with John Romero, and a lot of key members that were working on Prey at the time followed. This wouldn't be the end of Prey 1995 though, and they would hire Paul Scheutima to take over the project, and the new team would continue development, and at E3 1997 and 1998 they would actually show stuff to the public for the first time. But it was already a different game than the 1995 version technically. It was still the same engine though. But this new team also struggled with the engine, and eventually the issues would become so big that in late 1998 they would scrap it all. And 3D Realms was desperate, and they tried to find someone else, and they hired them to make a new engine from scratch, but that also didn't pan out, and they would actually have to pay back the $900,000 to GT Interactive so they could get out of the deal and didn't have the pressure from a publisher anymore, because they didn't feel like they could get it done anytime soon. And yeah, at this point it's 1998, and the game wouldn't actually release until 2006, which development for that started in 2001 at Human Head Studios, and they used the id Tech 4 engine, which was much easier to work with instead of trying to make a custom engine. And from there, the Prey IP kind of has a pretty short timeline. But basically, Prey 2 was announced and shown off, and then was cancelled, and then nothing happened for years before Prey was slapped on to like this other game by Bethesda, and they were like, oh, this is a reboot, and it was just a completely different thing, essentially, and they released in 2017. And then in 2022, we got the leak of the 1995 prototype, and that's kind of it for Prey. There's still some stuff that we haven't seen that could leak, specifically anything from that new 1998 engine after they cancelled the first custom engine after they showed that off at E3. So there's still potential for us to learn new things about the development of Prey. For now, we do have this 1995 prototype to look at, and I mean, you know, it's not much. It's really just a tech demo. But this is essentially the first playable thing that was shown to anyone, even though it was only meant for the eyes of executives at the time.
Now, while we're on the topic of Crash Bandicoot, interestingly enough, there's more when it comes to prototypes of things for Crash Bandicoot. Actually, there's some stuff when it comes to fully unreleased video games. We're talking about a 2009 canceled Crash Bandicoot project. So all the way back in 2009, the developer Radical Entertainment was working on a new Crash Bandicoot game, then under the working title of Crash Landed. That was going to be a full console game released on like the Xbox 360, PS3, and Nintendo Wii. But much like how a lot of games like this would release on main consoles, there would be alternate versions that would release on like the DS or the PSP or something like that. And Crash Landed was going to be no different. There was plans to develop a special version of the game specifically for the Nintendo DS market that still would be branded the same way, but obviously the gameplay would have been different, so it would need a different team working on it. Now this is interesting because Crash Landed's development process, even though the game was canceled, does give us insight into how a lot of DS versions of mainline type games kind of have development handled when it's under like a big publisher. Now, Radical Entertainment, the main developers of the game, were under Vivendi Games, the company that was going to publish this Crash Bandicoot game. Things get spicy though in this story because in 2008, Activision initiated a merger with Vivendi. So they acquired the company and they got all of the studios. But whenever stuff like this happens, it usually takes like a year or two for the new parent company to decide, what they're going to do with all of their companies and assets they recently acquired. And ultimately, the entire project ended up getting canceled by Activision probably in early 2010. However, before the shutdown happened in 2009, after the merge already had occurred, Vivendi was already actively looking for companies to do the DS version of the game, and there were 2 pitches made for Crash Landed. One pitch was a prototype version for the DS made by a studio called Renegade Kid, and the other one was by another studio called Way Forward. And interestingly enough, despite the fact that Crash Landed never released, both builds for the DS have leaked online, and you can play both versions of the demos that were presented to pitch this idea so that Vivendi would be like, you have the job, you can make the full version of the game. And they're interesting to look at. The Way Forward version of the game does show like the Crash Bandicoot redesign. I'm not a fan. I feel like Crash Bandicoot gets done dirty often.
You're kind of short.
Yeah, and his eyes are like weird. His eyebrows, like the smiley face, it's a lot going on. A lot of times prototypes like this end up just being like reworked from other games, and it's likely that this game was either reworked from some sort of Looney Tunes type game or the Tasmanian Devil type game, because there's a lot of assets found in the files for that. So there was some rework going on, but that seems to be pretty common for the industry for the DS back in the day. Now, the other company that was working on it was Renegade Kid, and they made their own prototype. And as you can see, the 3D aspect was completely different. The one made by Way Forward was more like a 2D side-scrolling type game with maybe some 3D elements. And the one that Renegade Kid was working on was a little bit more of like a 3D type platformer game. But oh my God, what is this Crash Bandicoot model? Neither company got this one right, I feel like. I mean, I know it's a prototype, but Jesus.
He looks cursed too.
Have they seen Crash Bandicoot before, or am I missing something? Do I not know the lore? Is this how he normally looks? Honestly, I do have to say, I think the Renegade Kid version does look like the better version. I don't know, it would have been interesting if any version was made, but it wasn't, so rest in peace.
Papyrus Design Group was a small game dev under Vivendi Games, mostly in charge of developing the NASCAR racing series. And in the early 2000s, they were struggling and they were facing closure of the studio. So as a last-ditch effort to get anything greenlit, they started developing a prototype for a Simpsons Kart racing game, internally also known as Poppy. And a few years back, 2 builds leaked onto the internet that were dated 2 months apart. One from December 2003 and the other one from February 2004. The builds are basically the same though, there's really not much difference between them. I think one has an FPS counter, the other doesn't. And I mean, I'm sure there's some like bug fixes or something, but nothing like major is different, like the content is the same. And from what I can tell, this was really a last-ditch effort by the developer to get funding for any game so they could stay open. But Vivendi turned down the project and closed the studio in April 2004, shortly after. So like the second Simpsons build is only like 2 months before the whole studio got shut down and everybody got laid off. So this literally was one of the last things, if not maybe the last thing they worked on as a studio. And it's a shame because like looking at gameplay of this and playing this myself, it is actually kind of fun. They already had created Homer and Marge, Bart and Lisa, and you know the map is also Simpson themed, like you can see Mr. Burns and stuff like that, and you know there's like the uranium like thing across the map, and you know it is themed after the Simpsons already. Even the hut has the classic Simpsons font on it. What's interesting is though that once you dig deeper in the files, you realize at first this wasn't even supposed to be a Simpsons kart racer. Instead, it seems like this was pitched as a Crash Bandicoot racing game at first, and then they reworked it into the Simpsons. Since in the files there's like a lot of leftover stuff, like a splash screen for Crash Bandicoot Racer Project by Papyrus, or even when you play the game, there's still music playing from Crash Nitro Kart, which was probably a placeholder for this initial Crash Bandicoot Racer pitch. And yeah, this actually kind of lines up. I think there's another game we talk about that was supposed to be a Crash Racer, and we got the prototype or something like that. I'm not sure where this section is gonna go, so either you already heard about this other one, or, I mean, you know, maybe you'll learn about it soon. Like, you know, just keep watching. And apparently you can restore some of this Crash Bandicoot pitch if you change some of the file names, but I couldn't figure it out, and I couldn't find footage of it, so like, I don't know if it's true or what it looks like. It's kind of a shame though, because it does actually seem like a cool project, and this is definitely a game I would have potentially like bought back in the day. I mean, I can see my like self at 10 years old playing this in my parents' basement. Yeah, definitely. In 2020, a user called Streak. Streak? Okay, this is a fucking weird ass username.
How do you spell it? Let's hear it.
SREAK.
Shriek. What a terrible username. You get to pick any combination of letters to make your username, and you pick Shriek.
Anyways, this guy with the weird-ass username posted some files that he found in an old Dreamcast dev kit on this Dreamcast forum. And inside, people found a prototype for a Simpsons game that was never publicly announced or revealed. And that game was named The Simpsons Bug Squad. And it was pretty weird. You are at the Simpsons house, but you're just some random bug. You're not like a Simpsons character. You just walk around as this random bug. It's very bland, and all you can do in the game is walk around the house, and you can see Homer and Bart, I think. They like just walk around, but they kind of ignore you. And not much is known about like what the end game was for this, but we know that this was developed by Red Lemon, which is a very small and mostly unknown development studio, and that it was canceled in 2000. And from my understanding, they developed this prototype to pitch it to Fox, but the pitch wasn't very successful, so we never heard of it. Fox didn't want to do this. And they probably didn't think running around as a bug is a cool idea, which, I mean, I kind of agree. There's like this weird PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 1 era game called Mr. Mosquito, where you are like a mosquito in a house.
Dude, did you ever play Bugdom back in the day?
Oh yeah, Bugdom is another one. Yeah, I guess there's some bug-themed games.
You don't want me just like monologuing about Bugdom for 20 minutes? We should.
You already did like recently. I remember. You played it in computer class. You went to the new school and, you knew the cheat codes to unlock the levels. See.
And you probably had to edit it, so you probably had to listen to it like 3 or 4 times.
Actually, I played Bugdom to get like the cheat code stuff because I couldn't find footage of it.
Nice. Did you play the Dragonfly level where you get to fly
I got footage of that too.
And what about the level with the giant feet?
Oh, I don't know if you talked about
you didn't play the feet level, dude? You're missing out.
I guess there's a bunch of bug-related games, so maybe this was a thing. But I don't know why it has to be The Simpsons. So, I don't know. Fox probably was like, what the hell, bro? And just sent them on their way. And nobody ever talked about it until it leaked. Also, there's another Simpsons prototype that leaked, but it's not like as interesting as the other ones. But I want to just like talk about it real quick. So when that Simpsons movie tie-in game released, it was released for PS3, Xbox 360, Wii, PSP, DS, and also on the PS2. But it was not released on the OG Xbox. But eventually, the prototype for the original Xbox would leak, and it seems like this is the pitch they used, or maybe this was made for the purpose of a tech demo. Nonetheless, this was something they would show to people to show off the project. And this shows that it was in development for the original Xbox around 2004. And while it never came out on that console, at least now you can play it in a very, very early form. Like literally, there's not much to do. You just walk around the Simpsons house as Bart, and you get to explore that, I guess. I mean, you can go to the backyard and stuff, and even into the treehouse. But the only character you can find is Homer, and he's on the roof, like grilling a hot dog over the chimney. I don't know. The only other Simpsons character I could spot was Lisa in the opening cutscene, but I don't think she's an actual model. I think it's just a PNG of Lisa's back thrown onto this cutscene. So yeah, this is a very early version, but kind of interesting still, so I wanted to throw it in here.
All right, now let's go all the way back to the 90s. Now, Luke, you owned a Super Nintendo, right?
Yes.
And you played every single game that ever released on it?
Probably not. Do I have to pretend I did, or
for the bit? I mean, not really. It's not really relevant.
Okay. I didn't know if it was relevant,
Okay, but there is a Nintendo-made Super Nintendo game that I think, unless you've been following like the deeper sides of the big Nintendo Giga Leak from like 6 years ago or whatever that was, you probably don't know about it. But have you ever heard of a game called Super Donkey?
No.
So this one's really interesting because if you look at the gameplay, it looks like a game you might have seen in like a retro video or something. Like, I don't know. I can imagine like some old Nintendo YouTuber making a video on a game like this. And I'm sure some of them did after information of this game surfaced. But nobody knew this was a game until that Giga Leak that Nintendo went through in 2020. And then after this Giga Leak happened and people were able to recompile the game and actually play what is playable in this game, to this day, we still don't really know any details about what this game is. But we can play it. It looks like this was a Super Nintendo game that was being developed maybe sometime in like 1991 or 1992. It has the code name Super Donkey, which has led a lot of people to wonder, like, was this a prototype for a Donkey Kong game? This was a couple of years before Donkey Kong Country rebooted Donkey Kong, so it is possible, but at the same time, that's just because of the name. It looks like if you look closer into some of the game files, there are references to other characters that Nintendo has. Link's name showed up, and even Mario showed up. What is interesting is who this little protagonist character is. Now, the character that they use here does resemble a character known as Mr. U, who was in a different game called Sky Skipper. I don't think they would have used him as the protagonist. I think this was just like a placeholder. And of course, this game does kind of resemble Super Mario World 2 quite a bit. I think the general consensus is that this was an early prototype build of a game that would eventually become Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. And there were interviews that kind of back this theory up, because I guess during the earlier development period, some of the developers had said that they were prototyping different ideas, and eventually they landed on the idea for Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. So I think that that's probably what it was, but the game is completely different, and there are a couple of levels. There's like 4 levels and a boss fight available, but the builds that are available of this game, they don't have any background music, they don't have sound, and the game is pretty much in a very early prototype stage. But it's something interesting we can see because nobody knew this game ever existed. And now we do. And now we're talking about it here. So something did come out of it eventually.
Have you ever seen this game?
Outpost Kaloki. I've never seen that. What is that?
It is like a Xbox Live Arcade game from the very early days. I think it came out in 2005. So it was like probably one of the first ones available. And basically it's just like a space station simulator type game. Like you expand your space station, kind of like a city builder thing, right? And it was okay. It wasn't like the craziest game, but it was okay. You know, it was what was available at the time. And then the studio behind it was Ninja Bee, who would go on to make A Kingdom for Kevlings, which is probably way more famous than this game. I think people have heard of Kingdom of Kevlings. A Kingdom for Kevlings, at least.
I have heard of that one. I don't think I played it, but I've heard of it.
Actually, did you know that it got like 3 other sequels? That was like,
I think I do know that too, and I think they got a re-release not that long ago too.
Yeah, something like that.
More recently.
Just wild. Nonetheless, sometimes when they weren't funding the game themselves, they would go under the name Wahoo Studio. They would look around and shop around for projects, and they actually got funded by Bandai Namco to make a space station tycoon game for the Wii around 2007, and the game was just called Space Station Tycoon. Very simple title, I guess. This ended up never getting released after actually a decent amount of development was put into it. A prototype leaked of the 2007 version of this, and it's pretty far along. You can actually like play it, and this was announced, and people were actually seeing this as a spiritual sequel to this Outpost Kaloki game. By August 2007, the initial release date passed, and you know, it just never came out, and you know, the news outlets were kind of like, I guess it's canceled. There was never like a real reason given. Also, they did announce a PSP version of this, and it does not have a prototype yet, so like, I guess that could leak in the future, right? I don't know how much work they went into it, but for now you can just like play this random space station tycoon game for the Wii, a Bandai Namco that never released. I don't know. There wasn't anything interesting about it. They did have voice acting. I'm pretty sure they made up an alien language for this. I mean, it's just gibberish, but like, you know, this was pretty far along. I don't know why it never came out. Maybe just they didn't think it would sell well. But like, I don't know. It's already at this point. Why not finish it?
Do you think it'll ever finally come out? Do you think they'll do something and make it happen?
That'd be crazy, like a HD remaster or something like
a remaster of a game that never released.
You know, the industry's desperate.
Not? I mean, it could have been neat, I guess, maybe.
I mean, I played a little bit of it. Is pretty boring.
Oh, was it not like the most fun experience you've had in your entire life in any video game ever?
No, definitely not. Definitely far from that. Oh. It's not the worst, so I just don't know. We had so much shovelware. Why would they cancel this random shovelware game? Like, I just don't get it. You know, it doesn't make any sense. But what?
Let's talk about Viva Pinata: Trouble in Paradise for the Xbox 360, developed by Rare. This is a sequel to the original Viva Pinata game and was built upon, you know, the stuff that they had laid out in the first Viva Pinata game. But recently, like really recently, I'm talking 2 days before I'm recording the audio for this section, so February 6th to be exact, a build from September of 2007, almost a year before the launch of the game, ended up getting dumped online. And now people can play it and straight up, you know, experience what this game was like while it was in the middle of development. Now, I'll be honest, I don't know every single in and out in the Viva Pinata franchise, but I will say from looking at this footage, it of course looks very polished for a prototype that's a year before its launch, which does make sense in this case because it's a sequel. So they already had a lot of the tools built from the first game, and they likely were using that as the baseline to build out the sequel. Still, I think this is cool that something like this releases. We don't get to see old prototypes, especially for like sequel games, I feel like, nearly enough. Apparently this version works best on PAL consoles, but there is a patch that the communities put out there that allows the game build to work on other region consoles. So yeah, I assume there's going to be other people talking about this since it literally just ended up getting leaked recently. But hey, look at that. Something really fresh for this video. And then, of course, there's the Dead Rising game, like the first Dead Rising game from way back in the day. And believe it or not, there's actually a lot of things that have come out over time, prototype-wise, that's really unique. Now, the YouTuber Stippo, is that how I say his name? I'm going to assume so, has a ton of great coverage showing Dead Rising and all the different prototypes. And there was like a demo that recently ended up leaking that was like playable once upon a time, but it was like the 50% build, and there's a lot of differences that are really, really nuanced. If you're interested in Dead Rising at all, I mean, this is just like my endorsement to go watch that stuff too, because there's so much to unpack with the first Dead Rising game that I don't feel like I could do the series justice. I wouldn't acknowledge all of the little things. I mean, there's videos going through some of the prototype blockout levels before things are even designed. Like that in itself is great. And I wish we had this level of coverage by more content creators who like prototype content, who can like just really just talk about their love for whatever specific game. Kind of like what we've done in the past when we really wanted to talk about, I don't know, like Halo or something. We just really would just dive all in. And I wish there was more stuff like this for other games. So good on Stippo for talking about Dead Rising, but I think there's more people we need in this genre for sure on YouTube. Oh, dude, I got the Sonic X dance recommended to me on YouTube right now.
Sonic X?
While we're making this video, dude. Hold on. You want to watch it with me?
Sure.
You know what I'm talking about, right?
No, I don't think so. Oh, wait, actually, I do.
This doesn't have to go in the video.
I mean, hey, they got everyone.
Honestly, the Knuckles kind of looks like the TV show, like the movie Knuckles, like the TV show movie Knuckles.
Yeah, do you think that's Idris Elba in that costume?
Yeah.
Oh, shit, dude.
What is going on?
Oh, dude, I remember this one part.
What is the lore behind this? Did Shadow forget to put his gloves? Oh. Why are the costumes so low budget, though?
So this is Brazil's major pay TV service provider. I don't know. And I guess they had this show or this thing.
Why though?
I don't know. I can't even find context for anything.
It's just weird because the costumes are so low budget, but the dance moves are so good. Like they're like good dancers in the suits. Yeah, like the choreography is like incredible.
They probably got the costumes from Amazon, or I don't know where you get cheap costumes. Party City.
What would this been, like 2003?
Yeah, Party City. Is that still a thing?
2003 maybe. That was crazy. Okay. All right. I have a very guilty conscience about a video game series that I have not played an entire game of. That's like really popular that I'm definitely going to lose some video game credibility here. And that's the Fallout series. Okay. Hear me out. I love the Fallout universe and the lore. And I've tried so many times over the years to get into a Fallout game. But it seems like every time I try to play Fallout, something happens that just messes up my experience. Like all the way back in the day, I tried Fallout 3 on PC when I got my new gaming PC. This was in 2015, and you had to use this whole like Windows Live thing, which was already outdated, to play the game, and it was a real pain just in itself. Then when I finally got the game running, I don't know what I was doing, but I was having fun for a bit, and then I killed some like radio host, and then I thought the game was soft locked. I don't know if it actually soft locks, but it definitely felt like I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, and I just fell off because there were so many steps to start up the game just to play it that I just didn't want to deal with it, especially if the last time I played it I was lost. So I fell off back then. I tried Fallout 4 sometime after it launched, and I really was just thrown off by like the main character talking. I just was taken out of the immersion. I don't know. I tried Fallout 76, and I wanted to like Fallout 76, but I don't think anyone likes Fallout 76. I tried New Vegas, and there was some promise there, but I don't know what happened with New Vegas. I don't think I just got far enough to just be invested. I think I played like 10 minutes, and then I was like, oh, I gotta go do something. And I never came back to it. So more recently, I finally decided to buckle in and try Fallout 3 again. This time on console, so it's nice to, get away from the computer and play on console. I know there's a lot of talks of a remake potentially happening or a remaster, and I don't really like remasters. I feel like they always do something wrong. So I'm playing the original one, and it's going well so far. I'm not very far, but this did get me falling down a rabbit hole of Fallout, especially Fallout 3, because as many of you know, there was another Fallout 3 that was being developed by the people that made Fallout 1 and 2, the games that a lot of Fallout fans have never played before. We did talk about this in the sister video to this video that we are, not double dipping in too much, but I did want to bring it up just because I think it's really interesting. It's the Van Buren Fallout game, the OG Fallout 3. I didn't realize how much gameplay is out there of this build. Prototype wise, the game was moving along pretty well, and a lot of the systems that would have been used in the game were built, and they just had to actually like build out the story and everything else. But engine wise, it's rumored that the game was like 80% complete as far as the game engine was concerned, so they just had to actually like go on and make the game. But as things like this happen, these fell apart, and we did
do a deeper dive into the Fallout series because even though I couldn't play through an entire Fallout game, I've tried many of them, and I really like the universe and the development history of these games. I just think it's really fascinating how many projects that are Bethesda RPG based, or now Bethesda, even though this was before Bethesda, ended up getting canned. But look at all this footage that there is of Fallout 3 before Fallout 3 happened. I don't know. I find this fascinating. There's an alternate timeline where the Van Buren was the Fallout 3, and then I honestly think the jump to 3D, as much as people like to say the old Fallout games are better, the people who actually play them might say that. I think the jump to 3D was probably the right call. It definitely made the game more accessible to more people than ever before, and they did a pretty good job at keeping the lore accurate and consistent. So I don't know. It's interesting. I'm excited to finally dip my toes and push through the rough starts I have with these types of games. I have the same problem with any type of Bethesda RPG, except Starfield for some reason. Skyrim, never was able to get very far in it. Starfield, I 100%ed. There's something wrong with me. I just like space games, I guess.
So here's an exciting thing, though, when it comes to Fallout. Fallout New Vegas actually has old prototypes that are now out there and playable. Something that people never thought would probably happen because it hadn't happened yet, so why would it happen randomly all this time later? It ended up happening in one of the weirdest ways ever. Fallout New Vegas does have an interesting reputation, besides the fact that people love this game, even if initially when it released, people were a little bit more critical of it. Nowadays, I think it's been cemented as a mainstay in the Fallout universe, even though it wasn't made by Bethesda. And more interestingly enough, the game was made in just 18 months, which for an RPG at the level of Fallout is crazy to think about nowadays. Because how long is it going to be before Fallout 5 comes out? Maybe 2035 or something, right?
Maybe if we're lucky.
If we're lucky. Just think of it like this. Back in the day, people had it good and they didn't realize they had it good. So with a game like Fallout New Vegas being made in just 18 months, different development builds are critical for understanding the development because, first of all, how did they pull that off? But also, if we get to see a different snapshot of the game that's earlier than the retail version, we get an interesting, not only ideas to how quickly things were moving along and what they're able to wrap up in a certain amount of time, but also we get a glimpse into the more ambitious scope that the game had earlier on in development. Like I said, nobody thought anybody would ever see a prototype version of Fallout New Vegas. But the most random discovery happened that ended up getting these builds out there, and it all started in Utah. I mean, that sounded way more dramatic than it needed to be.
What's happening in Utah, dude?
Okay, there was a small video game store in Utah. They were just selling developer Xbox 360s there, and on 2 of those, there was development versions of Fallout New Vegas. It's a little vague if both of the builds were on there based on the blog post that I found on Hidden Palace. The more important thing is that there was a July 2010 prototype, which is about a month and a day older than the final retail build of the game. And that in itself is really interesting because there's some big differences in a game that was literally 31 days away from having its final gold build published. I mean, just looking at this, and mind you, I don't have the most insight on Fallout yet. Mr. House doesn't look the way that he does in New Vegas. This is a placeholder here. And there's a lot of other discoveries that bigger Fallout fans have combed through, and there's a lot more coming up probably soon in the following weeks because I think one of the developer kits might have also had the DLC that later would come out for New Vegas, which is a whole nother rabbit hole to jump down. But it looks like even back then there was way more NPCs. There were different quests that were still being finalized and quests that ended up getting cut. There were different voice lines. In some cases, some of the structures and walls were different. I mean, even the Las Vegas Strip in Fallout New Vegas looks different in this build than it did in the actual retail build, even if it was just 31 days apart. So I don't know. I think that this is really, really interesting, and I'm excited because this is still a more recent thing with this stuff seemingly happening maybe about 2 months ago. So there's still a lot on the horizon. There's a lot of really good coverage, though, because the Fallout community is really into this, obviously, because this is cool. I'm excited to see more. But we actually can look at this older version here. I think that's awesome.
The Dr. House looks...
Yeah, dude, doesn't he look cooked?
Yeah.
It's not Dr. House either. It's
I know.
Mr. House.
Mr. House. Dude, I don't know. I might feel like him. I killed that on my playthrough, I'm pretty sure.
I didn't even know you could. Oh, I haven't played the game yet, so.
I mean, no, sorry. It's one of the options.
Wait, did you spoil New Vegas for me now? I'm a little salty if that is the case.
I mean, it is definitely...
I'm going to read the comments, and people are going to comment if you spoiled it on me, so I'm going to find out one way or another if you spoiled the ending of the game.
Oh, it's not... Well, there's 7 or 8 endings. I mean...
All right. I'm going to read the YouTube comments if you spoiled it.
I mean, you get to choose it. I said I chose, so it's my ending, dude.
I feel like you spoiled something.
I mean, maybe. I don't know what the Ken ending is, though.
So you don't kill him?
Yeah. Maybe? I don't know. Do you? Have any of you guys ever played the original 3 Rayman games when you were a kid? If so, you probably would know that they were pretty solid platformers for the time. But after Rayman 3 released in 2003, there was never a Rayman 4. But actually, there was 2 separate Rayman 4s in development around 2004-2005. The first Rayman 4 project was in development by Phoenix Studios, which were not a Ubisoft studio, so they were trying to outsource the franchise to someone else. There's actually not much known about this, but there is a couple screenshots that clearly show this would have been a 3D platformer. And for this specific Rayman 4 project, there was a lot of concept art leaked over the years, but unfortunately the project was cancelled sometime around 2005, because Ubisoft wanted to focus more on the other Rayman 4 project, because that was taking shape. And this other project did start out with the title Rayman 4, but eventually turned into Rayman Raving Rabbids. And Rayman Raving Rabbids is nothing like a Rayman game. There's no platforming, it is just a minigame collection. But before the Wii came out, Rayman Raving Rabbids was actually a completely different game. Originally it started as a 3D platformer being developed for the PlayStation 2, and it was gonna be more of an open world platformer where you had different areas to discover. And the main enemy were gonna be the evil rabbits that were gonna attack you and you had to like fight and punch them. And actually they would get Wii development kits and they would continue with the platformer idea, at least for a little while. And even during developer interviews with magazines, they were showing off screenshots of like this Rayman open world platformer, and that the Wii inspired them to not just create a typical platformer. Like they were definitely still planning on making this a platformer at this time at least. But the more they would experiment with the Wii and its capabilities, the further they would move away from the platforming elements and eventually just completely remove them and replace them with minigames. And that's how we got the Rayman Raving Rabbids we got now. But if you were looking at your screen for like the last 2 minutes, you would see there's footage of this cancelled Rayman 4 prototype. And that is because it was leaked in late 2022. A playable prototype version of the game leaked completely with the source codes and level editors. And people have been able to like partly restore stuff, but obviously it's just a prototype and there's a lot of technical issues and some of the levels are not as polished as others, and even the levels that are pretty polished are obviously not final levels either. But I mean, it is pretty interesting to see what Rayman Raving Rabbids actually looked like before it turned into this minigame collection. And while over the 16 years before this prototype leaked, there was a bunch of screenshots and like concept art and stuff that was leaked, and obviously there was that E3 trailer from Ubisoft, it wasn't showing much. Like you couldn't really grasp what the game would actually play like. But with the prototype leak, this 16-year-old mystery of what Rayman 4 Raving Rabbids would have been like kind of got solved. Another LEGO prototype, since we haven't talked about enough of those, was for the PS1 version of LEGO Stunt Rally from 2000. LEGO Stunt Rally released on Windows and on the Game Boy Color, and a PS1 port of the Windows version was in development before they ended up cancelling it. But they did announce the port and even advertised it on the manual for other LEGO games on PlayStation. And apparently the reason for this is that the original developer for the PS1 port was falling behind, and then they kept changing teams, and then eventually moved it over to another developer, and then they cancelled it because they couldn't get it done in time. And former devs have actually claimed that LEGO was at fault. They kept rejecting their ports, their builds, but it's not quite clear what actually happened behind the scenes for sure, but you know, it's cancelled. The prototype leaked though, and you can play it, and it's really janky, and it's this first company working on it, and I can definitely see why they wouldn't want to release this. First of all, this was like 4 months from release, and it looks and plays like this. Like, it's awful. You can barely stay in the lane. The hitboxes for things like are just off. They'll be like narrow apart on like a ramp, and you'll try to drive through it, and you'll like get stuck, and the game will teleport you back and respawn you, or you'll try to go through a loop and you get like stuck and your game stutters. I don't know, it's just a mess. And they were gonna have to finish this up in 4 months. And I guess no matter who they put on this project, they probably couldn't have done it, and that's the main reason why they canceled it. That's my best guess, but I mean, we don't know for sure. Like, how can they release a game that's like this 4 months before release? It's just not realistic, I think.
So while I was doing research for this, there were a couple of games that I just wanted to give a brief mention to, because they don't quite fall into this category of like game prototype footage we weren't supposed to see, because they're the opposite. They're game prototype footage. We did end up seeing that the game that would then release later would be not even remotely close artistically to what we actually saw early on. And it just kind of popped up because I'm looking at old footage of games, and then when you see like really out there footage, even if they showed it, that's so different from the actual game, it's interesting. Okami is one of those games. Have you ever played Okami? I haven't gone around to it yet. It's been on my list for years to play.
No, people always say it's very good, but I never played it either. I just know a bunch of furries who play it. By furries, I mean Tails.
Are you trying to tell people to go check out our other channel, Awful VR on YouTube?
Oh, dude. Okay. I'm gonna cut this, but I thought for a second I thought you were gonna say, "Are you trying to tell people check out Tails' Twitter account?"
Oh no! Don't check out Tails' Twitter account, and don't cut that because that's funny.
Oh, okay.
Have you ever seen this early trailer for Okami? It has like realistic graphics before they leaned into the art style that made Okami what Okami's really known for. Probably one of the reasons why Okami still looks good all these years later. This then took me down a rabbit hole though, seeing this Okami footage, because other games have done this too, that have had this stylistic art style. Borderlands, for example, in 2008, they did a beta and trailer reveal, and the game didn't have the cel-shaded graphics that Borderlands is known for. It had a realistic appearance to it. And looking at this gameplay footage, it looks absolutely unrecognizable from regular Borderlands. And mind you, Borderlands 1 came out in October of 2009. So the build and stuff that was shown off in 2008 meant that in just about a year, they shifted the art style so dramatically, and it ended up working out because, I mean, Borderlands became a franchise and then got even more popular after the first game, and then it got worse for a while, and then it seems like it's on the up and up, I think, with Borderlands 4. I think people generally liked Borderlands 4 more than Borderlands 3, but I haven't played it.
I just looked it up, right? You know, the critic reviews are like 8 out of 10, etc. The user reviews are as low as 4.6 or around 5 to 6.
I was actually going to finally buy a Borderlands game at launch because I wanted a game on the Switch 2, and they canceled the Switch 2 version like 2 or 3 weeks before it was supposed to come out. So, I mean, I think it's eventually going to come out, but now I don't care. One other game, though, that also did this dramatic shift from where it was in its prototype stage that we do publicly have access because they released footage showing what it looks like. We don't have gameplay. We can't play it. But I think it's so interesting and so good, which is weird because Xbox doesn't normally do good things, like make quality products. And in general, like, me calling this game a quality product is a stretch sometimes, but like big picture, okay, it's cool. Sea of Thieves. If you've ever seen the old prototype footage that was from 2014 of Sea of Thieves, this game looks crazy. It looks like a Unity tech demo thrown together, and there's old footage even showing Phil Spencer trying it out, and it looks like they're having a good time. And it did show, though, that sometimes you maybe don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to just like prototype an idea that's good. And if an idea is good, it can be scaled up into a full game. I don't know if Sea of Thieves is the best example because Sea of Thieves, in my opinion, as someone who's a pirate legend and has spent way too much time in the game, has let down a lot of Sea of Thieves fans. It's let down its own player base a lot. But there's something there, and it's a good idea that made the game interesting to begin with. And I think that seeing this old footage, as janky as it looks, it still looks fun. And I think that idea was captured pretty well in just like a little quick prototype. Have you looked at the Sea of Thieves 2014 footage recently?
Actually, this looks kind of better. I'm not gonna lie.
If this version of the game had a little more polish, like, I think it could have been more fun.
Yeah, also released on the N64.
Yeah, for PS1. Also, like, what is this studio that they had Rare in? Were they in an attic in some building? Like, I see Phil Spencer. It's like they invited Phil Spencer up into their attic. And it's like, here, come play this janky looking game. And Phil Spencer must have looked at that as like, let's give them millions of dollars and develop this idea. But hey, you know what? Back when Phil Spencer could make some good plays. You know, I mean, Sea of Thieves came out at a time where Game Pass was pretty cheap and you got to access Sea of Thieves. Like, back when Game Pass was really good, they were onto something back then. Then they, forgot about everything they were doing. That was pretty cool.
Hearts of Iron Road to War was a cancelled and therefore unknown Xbox 360 spin-off of the Hearts of Iron series in development around 2012, and last year a prototype build leaked online. Now, while there is a build and you can boot it up, all you can do is get to the title screen before the game crashes, so it's not playable. We don't know what's actually in there, and I don't think anyone really cares about this, so nobody really tried to restore it. Like, when I Google it, I just find prototypes for the other Hearts of Iron games and then the Hidden Palace article, but nobody ever mentioned it anywhere else as far as I could find, and I don't know. I guess this was gonna be a spin-off of a RTS franchise for console, and maybe they were inspired by the success of Halo Wars or something. That was like a couple years before, right? But like, there was never a Hearts of Iron console game, so maybe this was their only like try at making one, and they didn't go through with it. So that's another one that was only discovered when this build leaked. I wanted to bring this up because I completely forgot that this was a thing. Do you remember that the original FarCry was a PC exclusive?
I guess so. I think I know where you're going with this one, though, just because of my shoddy memory on it.
Yeah, it's just like a weird thing, right? And as it turns out, they did have plans to port it to the OG Xbox. At least we know that they did from a 2005 prototype build that leaked. And weirdly enough, at this point, they already remade Far Cry 1 for console as Far Cry Instincts, which was like a different game, essentially, right? It had different maps, different gameplay and stuff. It was just like scaled down for console hardware, right? But it was like the Far Cry 1 OG Xbox version. So they must have still been trying to get the original Far Cry running on console shortly before the 360 release in 2005, but it would be another 9 years before they would finally put the original in its true form on console with Far Cry Classic in 2014. The OG Xbox prototype is pretty buggy and doesn't run very well, which is probably why they decided to scrap it. But also, they must have not been that set on bringing it to console because it took another 9 years before they put it out. So I don't know, like maybe they were just messing around and couldn't get it to run and then gave up for almost 10 years. Which is like seems weird that like they would just stop and then pick it up years later. This actually was discovered just last week. Or I guess when this video goes out, maybe it's been 2 weeks or something. Beavis and Butthead Do Hollywood was discovered January 24th, 2026. And this game was actually announced for PS1 in 1998, and there are even magazine reports about it. After a review was privately shown to press in early 1999, and reports coming out that it was like 40% complete, it completely vanished. There was no reason given, nobody knew what happened, it just like never was talked about again. And this was supposed to be a 3D platformer with the Beavis and Butthead characters, and it follows the movie Beavis and Butthead to America, but has like a Hollywood theme. The team apparently watched a ton of Beavis and Butthead episodes and then modeled the game's style after it. And even the creator Mike Judge signed off on like initial storyboards for this game. And development apparently was rough because they had never developed a 3D game or a PlayStation game. Also, the company was financially not doing well. So they tried repurposing this into a Spider-Man game, and they pitched that prototype. But that Spider-Man prototype also didn't get them any publishing deals or anything like that. So the company went under, and with that, Beavis and Butthead Do Hollywood was also canceled. And, you know, we just have this prototype build that survived from 1998, and you can now play it for the very first time. And there was actually also files for that Spider-Man prototype game that was based on this Beavis and Butthead game. And yeah, I don't know. Here you can see what a 1998 Spider-Man game on PS1 would have looked like.
Ooh, look at that. Wait, this looks lit. But they don't say lit anymore, do they? It's like a 2014 term. I'm going to really date myself by saying that, aren't I? Okay, this looks cool. And then the longer I watch it, the more I realize like this was maybe a little bit rough. Essentially, at first you're like, wow, this looks really cool. And then you realize pretty much they just got a character that's able to walk around, run around, and barely swing around. That was the accomplishment there, I guess.
You remember the two great and popular lizards that are out there, right?
I think I have one of them. Wait, is this one of the great lizards?
Yes, this is one of the great lizards. And then obviously the other great lizard is the Geico lizard. Did you just kiss that box?
No.
What happened there?
Did not know.
Yeah, I looked at my notes and it looked like it.
Nope.
Then obviously the other great lizard is...
Anyway, so can you tell me how many the Gecko games there were?
3.
Wow.
I know my Gex, dude. Am I right?
Now, can you name them all with their full names, full government?
There's Gex, enter the...
Hey, no cheating.
Enter the Gecko, Gex 64, or Gex enter the... It's weird because it Gex 64 on the N64, but then the PlayStation 1 was just enter the Gecko.
That's true. Yeah.
Then there was Gex, and then there was Gex... Was it just Gex 3?
Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko.
Deep Cover Gecko.
There's 3 mainline games, and they did plan a 4th game, and that was cancelled. But also in between somewhere there was an idea pitched for a spin-off that was prototyped and called Gex Jr. This was a pitch by Imagine Builder Software, who made a bunch of licensed kids games in the late 90s and early 2000s before they eventually shut down. But in the last years, they pitched this concept for Gex Jr. to Eidos Interactive as a PS1 game. They wanted to get a publishing deal from them and get funding for its development because they wanted to get away from licensed game development and like PC market because they were making PC games. You know, they wanted to break into the console gaming as a studio. It just so happens apparently that a lot of people at the studio were fans of Gex. So, you know, like, why not go for it, I guess. And at some point, a CD-ROM with a prototype for Gex Jr. was discovered. And it was posted once again on Hidden Palace. It is pretty bare bones. There's one level, looks interesting, but you can't do much. You can collect some soda cans and parkour a little bit, and it's very simplistic. And there's some, like, voice lines recorded for Gex Jr., and I think it's just one of the developers doing, like, the voice, like an impression, I guess, or his best Gex Jr. impression. But, you know, they had references to the Teletubbies, Star Wars, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in those voice lines, so I guess, you know, they were going for something. And they actually never specified if this was going to be Gex's son or Gex as a kid. You know, it could have gone either way. You know, we don't know. Once people dug deeper into the code of this demo, they figured out that this originally was developed with a small dinosaur protagonist, but then repurposed, and, you know, they created this Gex Jr. character. Also, there was some leftover code that had to do with Rugrats, right? This is just code, so there's nothing, like, you can look at. But I think, like, was the original idea for this a Rugrats game? Like, did they prototype a Rugrats game where you play as, like, the little dinosaur and then they repurpose it for Gex Jr.?
Reptar.
Yeah. I mean, there's no confirmation for this, right? But it's just very suspicious that at first it was supposed to be a dinosaur, then there's Rugrats files in there left over, and then now it's like Gex. I don't know. So this is my speculation. I think this was originally a prototype for a Rugrats game, but, you know, we only have the version of Gex Jr. that we can look at.
There we go, 3 hours. Make sure you guys check out our other videos. Huge thank you to our patrons and YouTube members for making these videos possible. Triple check that you're subscribed, because I know YouTube's weird, doesn't emphasize it as much. You kind of just get recommended based on stuff, and a lot of people don't realize they're not subscribed, but hey, make sure you're subscribed. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next time with a new video.